right, everybody, we'll get started here. I didn't realize it was so I want to thank everyone for coming out. This is the first time we've done a Green Bay trolling panel discussion. I got probably about 12 questions here that I'll ask these guys, and then we'll open up to the crowd. So we'll get going. I'll let these guys introduce themselves, maybe tell a little bit about their past, how long they've been muskie fishing. Start out with Tim.
Alright guys, my name is Tim Lautenslager here. Caught my first muskie at age 8. That was my first targeted muskie, I guess. Been fishing in the bay. Caught my first one in 2008 on the bay. I was one of those lucky people that you catch a big one on your first fish. Mine was 50 inches. First fish on the bay, casting the fin. You know, slowly just kind of been learning from other people and gaining knowledge since then.
That's good. Okay. Go to Tom.
Tom Mathu. How me and my dad started catching one by accident. Then at age 13, we started fishing muskies pretty much exclusively. And then we started doing tournaments and probably started fishing the bay in 2012 or 13, and then got into the trolling gig probably 15 or 16.
Tyler?
Tyler Herman. I've been muskie fishing on the bay. 2013 I started, so 10 years now. And I didn't catch my first 50 until 2015. And after that, I caught 3 50s that week, and it took me 2 years, and then it was bang, 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 and trolling on longtail, and it's been a super addiction ever since. I just love chasing these things. So.
I'm Jamie DeGroot. I started muskie fishing out here in probably 2016 to 2017. Actually, the top right picture is the first muskie I ever caught. Was a 55 3/4 by 26 with Tom, so that pretty much started my career instantly. So.
Phil?
My name is Phil Stodola. I started muskie fishing basically right after high school. I grew up fishing bass and pike and panfish, stuff like that, and then I got really into pike fishing, and then I worked at Cabela's after high school. Some guys that I worked with got me into muskie fishing. It took me 2.5 years of fishing hard for muskies before I actually caught one. My first muskie was not a 50-incher, it was a 35-inch Pewaukee Special, but it was pretty cool. It got me really fired up, and I caught my first Green Bay muskie right when I was getting done with school. I'm a full-time firefighter paramedic. Right when I was getting done with paramedic school, I came up here. My friend had booked a trip with Chris Barch, and he asked me if I wanted to go along, which I said absolutely. And I caught my first Green Bay muskie with him. It was a 48.5-incher, and it basically changed my whole life. At that point, I had been applying for jobs in Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, because that's where I thought you caught big muskies. And then I applied for jobs in the Green Bay area, and I moved here. I joined the club, and I met all these great guys. And one thing led to another. I started fishing with Tyler first, I think, and then Kyle and Tim and all these guys, and ended up, now I work for a company called Angler Sport Fishing. My business partner is also a fireman in Manitowoc, and been guiding now for 5 years out here, and been fortunate to have a lot of interactions with a lot of world-class fish out here, so it's been super awesome. I appreciate everything from the club. The club changed my whole life. I mean, I wouldn't be guiding, I wouldn't be sitting up here if it wasn't for the club, so yeah, that's pretty much what I got.
All right, first question I got for the guys. Obviously, we got a lot of new beginners. What is your setup? What is your rod, reel? What kind of line do you run? Your leader, your weight, even your rod holders on your boat and your net. Kind of break it down to the basics for each of you. And each of these guys did bring in one of their rod and reel combos. You guys can take a look after and kind of see what they're all about. So let's go first. Right here.
So rod and reel setup, my rod is the furthest one away from the bay here. That's an AccuDepth reel and a wilderness rod. It's a cheap combo. I really don't have any expensive trolling gear at all. Save that for casting. It works really, really well. It has a very loud clicker on it, a great drag. That loud clicker is important for when you're trolling. I have a couple reels that don't have loud clickers, and sometimes those fish are mystery fish. So having the loud clickers are very nice to have. As you can see on that, I have a weight that's on there, two purpose. Number one is get the bait down, and number two is to catch weeds, leaves, other debris on that. I run 80 or 100 pound Power Pro on all of my trolling reels. And I run mostly wire leaders. I use strand for that. I do have some that have fluoro, and I use fluoro for a long time. Nothing against fluoro at all, just personally, I seem to have more luck on the wire and get a little bit more natural vibration and noise from it as well. My weight is 1.5 ounces as well. Planer boards, I run the same planer boards that Phil has one up here. I run the offshores with the upgraded black clips. I think those are Aura 18, right?
Yep.
Clips, and then having the bottom clip on the back with the nipple. Also run that as well. Rod holders, I have all Trax Techs, very similar to the left picture up there. I got the 3 trees, and then individual ones, as well as salty down east rod holders that I run on leashes as well. I know Dave talked about nets earlier. He said he has the heaviest net. I have the best net, which is the Drifter XXL. That thing is an absolute beast for holding big fish. It's had fish up to 56 inches in it, and it's not touching anything. It's just sitting there floating, which is the best thing for the safety and the healthiness of the fish. Never really had too many issues. The only issue is probably for super small fish. I'm talking like 20 inches, they can kind of roll in it, but really have never had any issues with the net itself.
Okay. All right. I run a pretty similar setup. Mine's the middle one there. I have a Convector 30D and a Kuma. They're the same reel that we're raffling off here. I run 8'6" Akuma Classic downrigger rods. It's a salmon rod. It's $28 on Fish USA if you order that rod. The reason I like those rods specifically is they have a real strong lower end, and they're really whippy in the tip. So if you have a big fish that you're fighting and it's doing big head shakes, that rod really whips, and you see that rod just keep up. If you have a stiffer rod, the worst thing that you can do when you're fighting a fish trolling is give it slack. So if that rod doesn't have enough give, if it's not bending to that fish, and it kind of just pops back, that fish can pop off really easily. We'll talk about that more with how we run our drags and stuff, but the setup that I have, it's imperative that you keep tension on that fish all the time. I run the same as Tim. I run 100-pound Power Pro braid line. I do run fluorocarbon leaders. I run the 1.5 ounce weight, same as Tim from Smokies on the Bay. Mainly just to keep weeds off, like Tim said. The offshore planer boards, like Tim said, I have the Aura 18 clip. One big tip that I have with these, and it used to make me feel a lot smarter than it does now, but these clips, you can move the back clip down to the bottom. There's 2 holes if you buy them new. If you have older boards, you have to drill this hole in the bottom corner. But moving that clip from here down to the bottom, from the middle to the bottom, makes your boards pull out a lot better, so you don't have to send out as much line. If you see somebody trolling and they have, 4, 5, 6 boards off of the side and they're almost straight back from the boat, I'd be willing to bet that their clip is up here and not down on the bottom. It helps that board level out, and it helps that board pull out. That was something we figured out when I first started coming up here, and it makes a world of difference getting that spread to go out without having to send your boards out an extra mile. Net, I have the same Drifter XXL. Tim talked about fish up to 50-some inches, and I was with Tim one time on the Fox River. We caught a sturgeon that I snagged that we netted that was beam to beam on a 621, so it would hold a fish much bigger. I mean, if you had a world record fish on, that would fit in that net, I promise you. So that's the net that I run as well, the Drifter XXL. Rod holders. I did used to run the Scotties. That's my picture on the right from one of my older boats. That is something that you can do. We'll talk about that in the drag thing as well. It will work. Right now we upgraded to the Trax Tech. We have basically the same as in the left picture. Now we have the trees and the rod holders. We have a Cisco rod holder on each side for the down rod as well.
All right, so for my reels, I run the cold water 30s, which are pretty much identical to the convectors, pretty much the same thing. For the rod, I run a Okuma copper lead core rod. It's a 8.6 medium. What I like about those rods is all the eyes are stainless, so you don't have to worry about chipping an eyelet and potentially cutting your line, something like that. I run 40-pound mono, different from both of these guys. And I like it. I don't know. And then this year I started running half my rod, or half my leaders are fluorocarbon, half are 21 strand wire leaders, just to see if there was a difference. And I noticed I still caught more on fluorocarbon this year, but that could change. That's just, you need more than a year to actually figure that out, I feel like.
I did that experiment too, and I found wire harder to deal with, and I got the same amount of bites on it.
So, yeah, if I had to guess, I got about 40 to 60 bites on the fluorocarbon and being the 60. So, and then I run, both of these guys run inline weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't run the inline weight. Yeah, grab that. So if you can see, I run that pyramid weight off of my barrel swivel. It's very important to actually hang that, if you're gonna do it this way, to hang it off the front end of your barrel swivel. That'll help prevent line twist if you're running a bucktail, something like that. Or a spoon, same thing. I mean, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
And then, what do we got next? Blender boards, they run the same as Phil, same setup. They're awesome. Rod holders, I got a mixed match set of rod holders, so I fished with a lot of people and I figured out what I like in each style. The trees, I got track set trees. Then I have 3 single tubes. Those are all Cisco's. I like how they adjust and they hold very well. And then for a down rod, I run a down eastern on a fat AZ mount. So, and then a net, I run a RS net, which I really like. It's getting kind of wore out at this point. It's 6 years old though. The yoke on it's kind of floppy, so might be time to upgrade that.
All right, as far as rod and reel, mine is very similar to Jamie's. Cold water 30s for a reel.
Who makes those? The cold waters? Okumas?
The rods are Shimano TDRs. I run 8, 8.6, and 9s. My line is 40-pound mono also. It's a saltwater version. It's called Momoy line. So it's a little bit smaller diameter. Ties a little easier, but same strength. My leaders, I run fluorocarbon too, 140 pound. And I also run the pyramid weight. Works dual purposes, catching weeds and keeping your bait around line. As far as planer boards, I run a little different than all these guys. I run Churches. They have the pin in the back for the line. And I upgraded the clips to a lockjaw, so it's just a clip on, clip off. And if you're running braid with these, you either have to wrap braid, but in the back, you just pull the pin and give it a little spin. It holds it in there, so it doesn't slide down to your bait. But the mono, it holds just fine. My rod holders, that's actually my last boat right there. Now I have a foot longer track, and I run a Scotty for a down rod behind all that stuff. And net, I ran an RS too, but that one got lost in action.
How come nobody found that one?
Yeah.
Huh?
We've
Weird.
been trying to troll it up.
It was her fault.
It was my fault.
So now I run a Frable Big Kahuna, which I really like the RS, but it was a lot heavier, a lot more drag in the water because it had 1-inch squares.
Sounds like they find the big kahunas, so good choice.
Nobody found that one. So yeah, no, it's the Frable. That one's a little easier by yourself and has a little less drag when you're trolling trying to net a fish.
RS does make the 2 inches also, though.
Yes, they do.
No.
That's what I have.
That's it.
All right. As far as a reel I use Okuma convector. I use 45s and 30s. 30s store and the rod holder are a lot nicer, but I like 45s. They got bigger handle for cranking in boards, for checking boards, especially if you got 12 rods. The big handle's pretty nice. I've been using a Cabela's whooping stick, 8-foot heavy. They don't make them anymore, unfortunately, just a cheaper rod. So now I'm kind of switching over to what Jamie uses, a copper Legport 8.6 Okuma rod, stainless guides. As far as line, I like mono too. I switched over maybe 4 or 5 years ago to all mono. I just feel like I lose a lot less fish with mono, but it's all personal preference. I still lose fish, so it's kind of all what you have luck on, and you just stick with it. 40-pound big game is what I use. As far as weights, I use like what Jamie uses, you clip it on your swivel. Mine's like a musket ball. His is like a triangle. They're all the same thing. 2 ounce or 1 ounce. Sometimes I use 2, sometimes I use 1, but I usually always use a weight. Planer boards, I like the offshore with the OR18 clip, just like that. That's all I ever use. Rod holders, I like trees, especially if you're running 12 rods. It's nice to get them out of the boat. Cisco, I like the cradles. I like having my rod close. Just personal preference. Net, big kahuna. I definitely like the big net. I used to use a smaller net because I fish by myself a lot. I used to use a smaller net, but man, you get them big fish, and it's just nice to have a big net. Even though you gotta use your arm as leverage, but it's way nicer having a bigger net that you can just scoop, even if it's heavier. I just think you need a big net to get under that big fish. So that's about all I got.
Let me grab it quick on the way back. All right, one more note before we get past the planer board thing. Write your name on it. RSA English Sport Fishing, because my business partner and I both use them. Put your number on it. I've lost and found many boards on the bay. If you lose a board and you don't have your name and number on it, I got a new board. If it's got your name and number on it, I'm gonna call you. I mean, I don't want bad juju in my boat. If I find a board with a name and number, I'm gonna call you. But if it's not labeled, it's new for me. And then I put on there beer or money reward if returned. I don't know. That's just that. If I saw that on a board, I'd definitely call that guy. So. Bob, you have a question?
A couple items based on what you guys were talking about. First off, you mentioned on your planer boards, you're using an OR18 clip. Now that is a modification based on what comes with its standard. Could you explain why you do that?
Yep.
And what it comes with and what you upgrade to?
So I believe they come with a clip more like this red one. It's an orange clip. The OR18 clip is just, it clamps down and it's got a solid, it locks it down. With the braid, I do wrap it around, so I run my line through and under and back through, and then I clamp it down. But basically, if you have a clip like this and you're trying to run, like a lot of walleye guys and stuff will use that, that's fine for walleye fishing. But when you're running with heavier baits and more drag and weeds grabbing on there and stuff, that board's gonna slip. These OR18 clips are not cheap. It brings, I think they're 15 or 8. Yeah, they're like 18 or 20 bucks a piece. But they are well worth it because your boards otherwise are gonna be either popping off or they're gonna be sliding down your line and it's gonna drive you nuts. Yep, and then the red clip has a little nipple in there, which Tim mentioned. But when you get the line in there, just make sure they have it inside that nipple, because otherwise, if you just have it held on by the little rubber pieces, it's going to slip out of there as well. And then your board will be running out of the line, and you got to reel it in and send it back out.
And that's just held on through spring tension, right?
Correct. Yep. Yep.
The back one.
The back one. This one locks down, and that one's held on by spring tension.
Is the heavier pressure ones an upgrade?
These?
Yes.
No, that comes with it.
This comes on the board, but then the...
I think the red comes on the front.
Red comes on the front.
back.
Orange.
Okay,
Just get
yeah.
rid of them orange ones.
Right, so yeah, what we all do is take the orange ones off, move the red one to the back,
Yeah.
and I do move it down, and then the OR18 clip you buy separate and you put that on the front.
And there is a tensioner on the OR18 clip, so you can tighten it or
Yep.
loosen it as needed.
So if you have little carny hands like me, you gotta make sure they're loose so you can actually get them off when you got a big fish on. Bob?
Also, something else, you mentioned your leaders, but what do you guys use for clips on the end of your leaders? Do you actually solid split rings, or are you using the fast hatches? Are you using coast locks, stay locks?
So, to attach my leader to, I have split rings. I'm thinking about making the decision to going entirely with split rings instead of clasp, but at this point in time, I just have stay locks. But the idea is out there that I may go to split rings for everything, all casting, everything split rings. So.
Right now I have Tyrant leaders, which just have a real simple snap on them. I did order new leaders this year from Trophy Time Leaders and Lures that have a stay lock. I think I changed baits too much to go with the solid split ring, so I think that's gonna drive me nuts to have to mess with it every time.
So when I order a leader, I order it with a solid welded ring on the end, and then I put a VMC crankbait snap, 90-pound VMC crankbait snap on that, and I don't think a fish will ever open that snap. I mean, you can barely open it without pliers. So
I do use stay locks, but when it gets cold, I do switch over to the fast hatches because they're a lot easier just to twist on and off when you can't feel your fingers anymore. So that works out pretty good.
I've gone back and forth over the years, but now I'm back to the stay locks, just because we're changing baits. It's so much easier than a split ring, and I've never broken a stay lock, so I'm just gonna stay with them.
Yeah.
What size do you guys run?
Size of what?
Stay locks. The bigger one or the?
Yeah. Normal size. Next question, please.
Come on.
Go ahead. He says 5. We got 5 over here. Anywhere? 6? 6? Anywhere? 6?
4.5.
One other item on your
He says 4.
on your reels, what are you guys using for gear ratios? And do you find any advantage to going with a lower gear ratio versus a higher gear ratio, especially when you're clearing boards all day long in September?
So I used to run the Magdas, which were a little bit cheaper reel. They were fine, but they worked well, but when I was using them as much as I was, the handle was like a plastic handle that had kind of sharp edges on the inside. And like Bob said, once you switch, and Bob didn't switch, but most people switch into trolling in September. And that early September bite is just weed city, like you have constant floating weeds. And if I'm running a guide trip and I have 9 or 12 rods out, I'll start by checking, the outside one on one side. I'll go through all the rods, and by the time I'm done, I basically have to go back to the beginning. So the Akuma has a 4.0 to 1 gear ratio. I see it right on the box here, but the Magdas had less line per crank, and you could tell it took a lot more work to reel them in. You want to have a reel that's really going to bring those boards in easily, and that's one thing with the convectors, that you can really rip it over to get it out of line, and then bring it in. And if you don't have something that goes fast enough, your board dives, and then you're fighting the board to get it back up, and it's just a pain. But the convectors work really well for me for that. Yeah.
Cold waters are faster.
Yeah.
Cold waters are a touch faster?
I think they're 5.
Faster than convectors.
Yeah.
Was there what?
Cold waters are a little faster than the actual convectors, but they're still the lower end gear ratio.
Yep.
Do any of you guys tie your own leaders? And if so, is there any kind of
Kyle
materials you're more partial to?
Carl ties leaders. You answer. We don't tie leaders.
Yeah. I tie my own.
I got a guy for that.
I started out tying the leaders, and I recently went to crimps. I tested them in my garage on a hook eye in the ceiling and all my weight on them, and I have a hard time getting them to break. So I do 2 crimps on fluoro, and even when I'm tying wire, I'm using 2 crimps. Yeah, it's
Crimping ain't easy.
it's pretty easy. Get yourself a good crimp tool. That'll probably be my best advice as far as if you're going to crimp, and make sure you have the right size crimps along with the wire as well.
I do 2 Chinese hooks and 2x4s.
Yep. Same answer?
Yeah, I kind of do the same thing. I've tied and crimped before, but I do put a little sleeve. That's another saltwater thing. It's like, it's kind of like a rod sock, but just a little tiny version. You just cut that off and put that on your loop. And I have a solid ring on there, then a split ring, and then you can add whatever you want onto it. If you want to split ring them right on, or then you can swap out between the two different swivels. But that stuff, I just feel like it helps a lot just for the wear. While going back and forth nonstop, at least something's soaking up that.
They're Jinko coils, I think they call them.
Are you talking the other
Yeah,
ones?
Jinko, I think is the manufacturer, they're coils.
I know he's just got those. Mine are actually like woven nylon.
Oh, they're really?
They're just like a tiny little rod socket.
Yeah, I just made some with them.
They're on there.
They're Jinkos.
Wire ones.
Yeah.
I can.
All right, weed control. They talked a little bit about weeds on the bay. I guess maybe touch briefly on kind of what that weed does and maybe the times of the year where the weeds are bad.
Yeah, so obviously the weeds are bad when there is weeds, so when it's warm out, so August, September, June, July, all that fun stuff. Like I said before, I just run the Tilke weights in front of mine. It does a pretty decent job of picking up weeds. I mean, if it's out of control, obviously some are going to get down there. Be honest with you, I clear them as much as I can, but if they're too bad and it's miserable, I leave. I go somewhere else. There's fish all over the place. There's fish where there are not weeds floating all the time. So, I mean, if I pull up to a West Shore spot and there's a bunch of weeds, I won't even put a line in. I'll just go somewhere else, find somewhere, go to where the wind is coming from, because there's going to be less weeds there. So head that direction, find a spot that you think looks good. I mean, it's always a good time to try something new as well when there's a lot of weeds there. Yeah. So that's kind of what I do.
Yeah, I agree. There's times that picture of Tyler down there on the bottom, like that, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Like those pictures are mine in the background. You can see the weight is doing its job in the one in the middle, and the one on the left there, and the one on the right, it is not. You want those weights to catch on the weight, or the weeds, I'm sorry, weeds to catch on the weight, and just keep your bait running clear behind it. That's why we run the longer leaders. That's why we do that. But ultimately, hopefully you're going to look at your boards, and if they're not, I mean, you're going to run pretty similar baits on most of them. So if your boards are running in a straight line, if one starts dragging back, like if you're walleye fishing and it looked like you had a walleye on, you probably got weeds on that one. So you want to reel that in. If you have a lot of weeds, I do check them. I mean, religiously. I mean, if you're out there and you're running and your baits are dirty, it's possible to catch a fish. I've heard stories like that, but ultimately your only job while you're out there is keeping those baits running clean and just, staying in the bait. So I mean, really, if it's a day, like I agree with Tim, if you pull up and there's just weeds everywhere and you're not able to run clean, your chances are better fishing a spot that in your mind might be a secondary spot that's not the prime spot that you think the fish are going to be. If you're going to be gummed up with weeds all day and fighting them, it's going to be worse off than if you just find a spot where the weeds might be a little bit better. There are times when you have to fight through them if maybe your wind is wrong, where it's going to be really rough in other spots. And like I said, at that point, you're literally just checking them constantly. And yeah, that's when I call Jamie to come along on my guide trip so that he can run my rods for me.
Phil, now when you stay in the bait, are you using your side stand to keep the bait?
Yeah, we'll get to that too. But I kind of skipping ahead there, but yeah, yep.
Okay, so pretty much the only reason we run weights is to catch the weeds. We're not using it to get any deeper with our baits. The one other thing you can do is you can buy these red clips that come on the back, or that we have on the back of our boards. Hang a weight off of here, and 2 or 3 feet behind your board, you can hang this to essentially catch more weeds before they actually run all the way down your line. So that's the only other thing I actually do.
I feel like they covered it pretty good. I don't really have anything to add to that.
Yeah, so I think most of these weeds are floating, so like Jamie said, they hit your line and then they float down to your lure. So a clip like that is definitely a good idea, even a couple feet under the water behind your board. Doug Wagner sells weed kits you can buy, but anything that...
Have you tried those?
Not the weed kits, no.
Okay. Has anybody tried those Doug Wagner weed kits from Leaders and
I've
Leaders and Lures?
used the ones with the pieces of wire that come out
Yeah.
that go on your leader.
Yeah, yeah.
They catch a lot of shad. If you're in the bait,
Yeah. Shad spears.
Spikes.
Yeah.
You know,
I
they work, but I don't know. I'm not
I-
gonna bash them, but they work. They do work. I use a couple of them. So
In my experience, it makes it tougher to store your rods. Like if you're gonna try and take your rods and put them into a rod locker or even put them together, they can get messed up.
definitely.
I think also in my mind, and again, I love Doug, he's a good friend of mine, but if you're gonna run those and you have something sticking out like this from your line instead of something that's just in line, you're gonna catch more weeds than you need to ultimately. If there's weeds going by, you're gonna grab more weeds. I mean, your bait's gonna probably run pretty clean because it's gonna gobble
They're
up
like
on
a
there.
weed catcher.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, literally,
But you
as
don't need
opposed
to
to a
catch them,
weed
you
guard,
just-
it's more of a weed catcher. And,
Right.
and I do understand the idea that it's gonna catch those weeds that are coming down your line, but I think you're also gonna end up with more weeds than you need to that might otherwise just kind of blast past you.
And like Phil said, the biggest thing is watch your boards. Once you do it enough, you'll see all 6 boards on each side are lined up. If you got one that's falling back in the same bait, there's something messed up with
And
it. Pull that
you
in.
get to the point, like any of the guys sitting here, I promise you, if you look, and even if there's like one reed
Yeah,
that's this
you can-
long that's hanging on your
You
weight,
can tell.
you'll look and you'll be like, that one's got stuff on it, like, and you stare at them long enough, you're like, yeah, that one's not running right, and you get to, I mean, ultimately, if you reel it in, if it looks weird and you bring it in and it's clean, hey, good for you, extra credit. But if you reel it in and it's gummed up, that bait wasn't working for you. So as long as you keep your baits fishing, that's going to be your main goal, with the weed control. Sorry to
Use a treble, size 2, cut the tips off, take the storm with little little alligator clip, put heat shrink on there, and put them on that. That looks pretty good.
Yeah, I've heard of that as well.
Yeah, I've heard of that as well. Too.
Yep.
Yep.
Pretty much anything you can clip on your line to keep them from sliding down.
Does your leader length have a lot to do with that?
That's why we use 5-foot leaders mainly, because a lot of weeds are like 3 feet, 4 feet long, the stringy weeds. So if you're using just a 3-foot leader, a lot of times you'll get them long weeds and they'll be down by your bait.
Yep. Carl left.
He left the building. I think he needs a plug-in.
Yeah. All right, Scott.
So does anybody have any questions? As long as we're sitting here for
Here it comes.
a holding pattern.
I think he just streaked.
Wow.
I think he was streaking.
I did see a moon.
When you troll bucktail, or
Sure.
shorten your leaders.
Yeah, we can answer that as long as Carl's got a technical difficulty here for a minute. When I'm running bucktails, and I'm sure other guys will have different answers, if I'm running double 8 bucktails on a planer board, I don't add any extra weight. I run my 1.5 ounce weight. I usually run them about 30 feet back, and I can just run them. If I'm running 9s or 10s, I'll take one of those red clips with a 2 ounce weight, and I'll clip it right in front of my weight, just to keep that down a little bit more. And even if I'm running it on the down rod, I'll do the same thing. I'll clip that on. A 9 or 10 blade is going to have more lift. Just to keep it from blowing out, I'll put an extra 2 ounces on there in front of the leader and the weight, and that just helps me keep them down. If I am running them on boards, I usually only run, if I want to run bucktails, if I'm in my mind thinking it's a bucktail bite, I'll put one on each down rod and I'll put one on each inside board, and then from there I'll still run crankbaits on the outside, because for me, and I know guys can do it, but for me, if I'm going to make any turns, if I have to make anything, like if you make a hard turn, that inside is stalled out, the inside board is still going to be moving the fastest. If you have one way on the outside, if you're running 12 rods and you turn to your left, that one is going to sink right to the bottom. That one's going to be not moving at all. It's going to go. And I know, if depending on it, in a perfect world, if you're out there by yourself, which doesn't often happen, but you could drive in a way that you would be able to run more bucktails. But a lot of times there's guys out there and you have to avoid them or kind of do evasive maneuvers. And at that point, for me, I don't like running more than 4 bucktails, just because I think that I'm going to have problems with them sinking to the bottom if I run further out than the first board for me. Jamie?
So I'm a little opposite. I like running bucktails a lot, trolling. And I've trolled 12 bucktails already at one time. And what I do is I add more weight, and and let less line out. Say I'm trolling in 15 feet of water, I'll let 15 feet of line out, but with more weight to actually hold the bait. So
On the outside ones?
yeah, I'll
Okay,
run.
go ahead.
Yeah, so like he said, 10s are going to have a lot more lift. They're going to be up a lot higher. So I'll put 10s on the outside, then 9s, then 8s closest to the boat, and I'll let them all out the same length. So they're going to be running at different depths, but I know exactly where each one is. So, and yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
It
How
really,
much weight do you use?
2, 3, or 4 ounce. I'll go all the way up to 4 ounces. So
Do you 4 on the 10s? Or on...
I'll match everything.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So if I'm running, yeah, I'll match everything. If I'm in, say, 10 feet of water, I'll put 10 feet of line out behind my board, but I'll actually run 4 ounces. Once I get deeper, I'll start running a little lighter weights, so they're up a little higher, but say you're trolling 20 feet of water, then I'll put 20 feet of line out. So that's how I do it.
Sweet.
Are you adjusting the leader length at all, or you still running 4 or 5 feet?
I'm still running the same leaders.
Do you have any problem line choices?
No, so like I said, if you take your weight and actually hang it on the front of your barrel swivel, you can check on my rod later, that will prevent any line twist. Just because behind your weight's what's actually going to spin instead of in front. So if you do it the other way, the
weight's going to spin.
No, your weight.
Weight keeps it.
Yeah.
It's like a twist, it won't spin.
Grab that rod.
He's saying if you didn't do it that way.
Yeah, if you didn't do it that way. So obviously this is my main line, this is the leader. The weight is on the front of the barrel swivel. If you hang it on the back, then this is going to be the part that actually stays stationary, and this is going to be the part that spins.
Right.
So now
Then you'd have a line twist. If you
Yep.
put it in front, if you don't put it in front of your barrel swivel, you're going to get a line twist.
Yep.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
that's actually pretty.
Same with the inline weights, those run in front of the swivel, so it's
Yep.
the same kind of deal.
So
Anybody have anything to add to that, or any other stuff?
I don't ever run more than 2 ounces of weight with my bucktails. I personally, if I'm running bucktails, I'm typically running everything kind of high up at that point in time. I feel like the fish are more active, so I just go really, really fast and have them really high. I also run longer leads on my bucktails, typically like 30 to 35 feet back, except for down rod. Down rod's the exception. So my down rod, I'm running at like 10, 12 feet. I want it right in the back of the boat. So, yeah, and I use the same leaders, everything else, but typically I'm bumping up the speed. So then, like Phil said, if you're running crankbaits as well, you got to make sure that the crankbaits you have on can run at those speeds as well. So
They don't blow out.
yeah, sometimes that's not always a super shed, sometimes that's other things, but typically super sheds are pretty speed resistant baits. And I want to say one more thing too, when we were talking about the weeds, this time of year, it's leaves that are the big issue. So, you know, being more diligent about checking lines, because there can be one little leaf that'll hook on the back treble of that bait, and sometimes that's not enough to make the board fall back or change. But I think it's going to be a lot tougher for you to catch a fish with that on there. Not that it can't happen, but definitely I'd say be more diligent the month of October per se, or after a big rain flow when everything's going.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I had that multiple times today where I reel them in, and basically if I'm making a big turn, like, you know, if I'm going down frying pan, I'm going to turn around or something, I'll grab the side that's going to be going faster, so those rods that are going more behind the boat and not the ones that are coming out and slowing down, I'll grab the back one first and I'll reel it in, because it's going to be easier for me on the turn if those rods are moving the fastest for me to rip that one in, and then I send that one back out, and I know my numbers that I can send the boards out, and that way if I send the farthest one out 200 feet, the next one out 150, I know that I can send that one out, and as it's catching up, it's still in the middle of the pack, but it's far enough back that I can bring the next one past it, and I can kind of just continue without having to wait for, like if you start on the inside and you're going out, then you kind of have to wait for that board to get in line before you can bring the next one around past it. So yeah, like Tim said, be diligent, check your odds, make sure you're running clean. I had that multiple times while I was out there today with leaves, catching small pieces of leaves that weren't pulling the boards back.
Oh, we're back. We're back. What do you guys do, bucktails?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So, going back to bucktails, like I said, I like running bucktails, and if I said I have ran 12 at a time already. The reason I do that sometimes is if you want to cover water, bucktails are a great bait to actually, you can scream with them. I've caught fish up to like 4.2 miles an hour trolling bucktails. So if you have your whole spread bucktails, they're all fishing. I feel like if you're pulling a crankbait at over 4 miles an hour, it's going to be a lot tougher to actually catch a fish on a crankbait. So that's why I like running a lot of bucktails when I do run them. So.
Sure.
Green flag race me.
Sorry, a little technical difficulties there, but we're back up and running.
Thanks, Salishy.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Slish. You're the best. Let's talk about drags. I heard you guys. Some of you guys run braids. Some of you guys run mono. Are you guys setting those drags differently while you're fishing? And are you tightening or loosening while once you're hooked up, reeling them in?
Yeah, just a refresher, I run braid, so I run everything probably a little bit looser than some of the mono guys. But I have pretty loose drags. If anybody has questions about like how it actually feels, I'll have my rod up here and I'll make sure that it's at the right drag and you can actually feel, because it's hard to just tell you, oh yeah, I run it like this. It's kind of easiest just to kind of feel how that comes off. But you know, if it's rough out, basically, let's say just enough where a wave doesn't make it click and pull back. Real loose, you can't be too loose almost type of guy. You can always tighten it if you need to be. But you know, you're going fast, and like I've been going a little bit faster than normal, so I mean, you still have enough resistance on there where you're going to sink that hook in the fish's mouth. And if need be, you can always tighten the drag. It's a lot harder to recover from an over tight drag than too loose of a drag. You know, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Particularly if you have inexperienced anglers. If you're guiding like Phil or you have kids in the boat, looser drags are a lot more forgiving when you can't read that fish, feel that head shake coming, where you can give a little bit of a resistance to it or a bend in the rod if needed. So I think that looser drags are overall better than tight, but that's for my setup.
Yep, I'm the only other braid guy up here. I run the same thing, and the best way for me to describe it is if I grab the line like this with 2 fingers, I'm going to be able to pull out pretty easily. Like if I have to like wrap it a little bit and pull more, that's too tight for me. I want it, like Tim said, to be barely to the point where if I'm in rougher water where it's not pulling out when a wave goes by. And sometimes if I am in rougher water and I have a click here and there, that's perfect. I know that I'm at the right point then. So basically, for me, when I'm getting rods set up on a guide trip, I'll let people know, like, all right, the drag's going to scream, the fish is going to run. As far as tightening up drag, it's gone now, but we had tightening up drag when a fish is on. I tell clients, do not, absolutely, under no circumstances do I want you to touch the drag. Guys who are used to salmon fishing or whatever, they're used to fighting a fish for 40 minutes to an hour or something like that, longer. I understand, I get it. Muskies are going to tire out pretty fast. I tell clients, if a fish is running, let them run. It's not going to last that long. A 5-minute fight with a muskie trolling is a long fight. So basically, if that fish is taking line out, let them take line. The biggest thing when you have a fish hooked up is to make sure you keep reeling, keep tension on them. Like I said, the enemy is slack. Slack line is going to let that fish pop off. You want to keep tension on it. But the second worst thing you can do is to try and stop a fish. If you have a big fish on, and I've seen it happen, I know other guys that I've talked to, Chris specifically has told me that he's had this, but like, if you have somebody try to either tighten the drag up and horse a fish in, or take their thumb and stop a fish that's running, you're going to break your hook, you're going to break your leader, something's going to break. I've had, fish, even super shads that, they're just made of wood. That wire harness starts pulling out of the wood. Like, it is everything you can do to wrangle in a fish that's 40 to 50 pounds when everything goes right. If you try and either horse them or not keep tension on, that's how you're going to lose those fish. So basically, I run my drags very loose. If anything, I tell people I'll come up and I'll turn that drag literally 1 or 2 clicks, maybe just not a quarter turn even, like just barely at all if the fish is really, really taken and they're not gaining at all. But ultimately, I want them to keep reeling, and they're going to end up picking up on that fish soon enough. And yeah, I just make sure they don't try and tighten them up and horse them. That's the main thing.
So with mono, we do run them a little tighter than these guys do with braid. And
Why is that?
I feel like with that stretch, you have a little more play.
Mono's more forgiving.
Yep, mono's more forgiving. That being said, I'll never tighten my drag after a fish is hooked up. If anything, I will back it down a little bit, like they're saying. But I feel like, I don't know, when I switched to mono, I started losing less fish also. That's just my preference.
Yeah, with the mono, the drags are a little bit tighter, but I still like to be able to pull a little bit out without wrapping it around my hand or anything, but it takes a little bit of a pull. And same thing, don't really tighten them up once you get a fish on. It's plenty tight already, especially with the mono. The extra forgiveness.
This one's set already. Set how I would be trolling it if you want to check it out. So.
Do you run the drags differently on a down rod versus a forward rod?
Nope. I run them all the same.
Yep.
And again, with the waves, if it is taking a little drag, clicking here and there, I will tighten it up just to stop that, but only as much as it takes.
Yeah, definitely tighter with mono. Maybe tighter than these two, but not super tight. I can still pull it out with one hand, but just because mono has that stretch, you want to, especially a big fish, you lose a lot of big fish. So it's like, is your drag too tight or too loose? And you think of casting, you always lock your drag down casting. So it's like you want that tight drag to bury them hooks. So I do it a little different, I guess. I like a tighter drag, but not super tight where you're going to snap your rod when the fish bites.
Yeah.
Kind of, I don't know, it's kind of in between.
I'll take that too if you're done. So going back to the rod holders, I know I used to run the Scotty rod holders and you used to run Scotties as well. That's a big thing. So those Scotty rod holders are plastic, the bases are plastic, and that's a huge thing. If you're going to go out there and troll on Green Bay with Scotty rod holders, that's fine. But if you tighten down your drag, those things will absolutely, if you put too much torque on them, they will snap and your rod will be gone and the fish will be gone and the whole stuff will just be absolutely, I mean, there's deadheads out there, there's stuff you can snag, but even if you get a big fish on and your drag is tight and you're running braid specifically, but even with mono it could happen, those things you can see them as you hit waves and stuff, they flex a little bit, and if anything ever pulls tight, like in my boat, nothing should ever pull absolutely tight where it just stops. There should be enough that when something pulls, it should just be able to take, and that's why I run rods that are whippy and loose drags. When somebody's fighting a fish, they're not up there like, steering it back and forth, trying to horse it. I tell them to walk back, keep the rod up, and the rod tip eats up those big head shakes, and the drag, if they want to take a run, they can run. I mean, they can, even if they're, hooked funny or whatever, if they want to run a little bit, that's fine. I just give them time, and eventually you kind of pick it up. And even if we have to slow the boat down more, whatever, but the last thing I want to do is crank the drag down tight and try and horse them in, because you're going to either, if it's beak hooked, you're going to rip the hook out, or if it's not, you'll break the hook again, you'll break the leader, anything like that. So stuff breaks when stuff gets too tight. That's what I say.
The biggest thing is never thumb it, unless you're experienced. But if you get a guy, I've seen people salmon fish and you put your thumb on there and boom, fish pops off, you bring it in and your hooks are straight.
Yep, you can break split rings, hooks, whatever, something breaks, right. Yep.
I got my questions here. We'll just go along without pictures.
Okay.
All right, next we'll go into seasonal transitions. Kind of talk about maybe the transition throughout the summer to the late fall. When are you looking for structure? When are you looking for bait? Is it both all the time? I guess kind of when does that switch from the structure to just trying to find the bait?
Yeah, I mean, basically, always looking for structure and bait. You can never be in the wrong spot when you have both of those together. Doesn't matter what time of year or anything. There's, the typical season progression where fish are, summer they're more on weeds, transitioning to once water temps start to drop below 68 degrees. It seems like those fish are kind of starting to move off the weeds. Definitely still fish on the weeds, I would say until about 60 degrees. But those fish start to move off of the weeds, which that would be, probably mid-September area. And then they kind of focus on more of the shad and later on whitefish and other types of bait fish that are congregating and getting together to spawn, whether that be in the Fox, other tributary systems around the bay itself. So typically, I'll troll from the whole season at opener if I need a lunch break or something. I'm trolling at that point in time, trolling the Fox or something like that, just the main channel, getting fish coming in and going out. Then June's a very tough month on the bay. I can't really say that I have great predictable success in June, so we'll skip that. July can also be very tough as well, but if there are fish, they're typically going to be on the weeds, if there are good weeds and good water temps at that point. Same through August, mostly casting, but if you are going to troll, it's going to be the same weed areas that you're typically casting at, off the break, that 10, 12, 15 feet of water. Typically you're going to mark some bait there, try to find that bait and get those transitional fish as well that are coming off of those structures, going to those structures and weed. And then transitioning September, like I said, more fish are kind of falling off of those weeds, trying to find bait, the typical areas that bait congregates. And then, if you can find some structures, particularly, I'm a fan of shallow structure versus deeper structure, where bait is. In my opinion, you can try to catch some fish that are in 15 feet of water where there's a bunch of bait, or catch some fish that are in 5 feet of water where there's a bunch of bait. There's a lot less water column for fish to not see your baits than there is in 15 feet of water. I feel like you have a better average per fish that you contact in that shallower water where there's still bait and hopefully structure. And don't be afraid when you're fishing a structure to move away from the bait, because sometimes they're pushing that bait onto that structure to feed in shallower water, or even if your boat goes over, everything I'm marking is at the bottom in 8-10 feet of water, when realistically, if you're looking at your side scan is showing you, wait, that bait's way up in the column. Or if it's flat calm, sometimes you'll see the bait jumping and skipping on top of the water. So being able to read that and say, it's actually the boat going over the bait that's pushing that bait down or out, and kind of trying to be able to make those adjustments to follow the bait. Eventually, if you're in bait, there's going to be fish there, you're going to find some. So having that good 2D to be able to find that is key on the bay, in my opinion. But there's some areas where there's just always a muskie on the structure. So
Where's that?
Yeah. Frying pan show.
Yeah, that was a very comprehensive answer. The only thing I have to add, really, as a guide, sometimes I find myself in a situation where I either have clients who are not able to cast all day, or they get out on the bay and they're not used to fishing big water, and they want to cast, but they can't do it in the waves. So I end up trolling a lot of times when I feel like casting would be ideal, when guys are on the top of weed beds, when guys are fishing right up on the structure, and I end up kind of trolling adjacent to the structure. That's the time where I'm going to be running bucktails, I'm going to be running crankbaits on the outside, and honestly, I do get a lot of fish on crankbaits that time of year too, but that's talking like usually late summer type stuff when guys are fishing weed beds. Last year specifically, I found a lot of times I try to hug that weed edge and fish right up tight so that my outside board was going to be near the weeds. I kind of slid off a little bit more last year and marked fish. Like if I'm trolling this time of year or in September, if I'm in 15, 16 feet of water, that's pretty deep. I do fish a little bit deeper than Tim, as a habit, just kind of my style of fishing, and it works for both of us. But if I'm fishing 13 feet is kind of like 10 to 13 is kind of my comfort zone, maybe 7 to 10, 7 to 13 I'd say, but if I get deeper than that, usually that feels a little deep to me, but I was catching fish in like 20, 21 plus adjacent to weed beds where I would go out and I would mark fish, and it actually, it happened because I was going along edges of weeds, and I would go out to make a big sweeping turn, and all of a sudden I would mark a fish on my side scan that was following, and I'd mark it multiple times, and if we had the pictures up, you could see some of the pictures where I had graph follows on my side scan, and I'm like, these are muskies, they're clearly following, they're in deeper water than I'm used to fishing on the bay, but I was like, well, I'm not going to argue with the fish, I trust my electronics, so I went out and trolled, and in that deeper water adjacent to the weeds, and I ended up catching muskies in much deeper water than I would normally have done it otherwise. So that's a big thing. Yep, that's what I was going to say. So trust your electronics. If you're seeing bait, if you're seeing muskies on your side scan, don't doubt yourself. Don't doubt your electronics. Like, I remember when I first started fishing up here, I was on a bite that I was catching fish, and I was marking a lot of bait, and there wasn't anybody else around at that point, and it wasn't like a secret spot, but I was just there earlier than most people, and I ended up like doubting myself and going back to a more community spot and fishing with the crowd. And I remember again talking to Chris Barch, and he's like, "What are you doing? You're catching fish. Like, why would you do that?" And it's like, yeah, I guess that was really dumb. So like, trust your electronics. Don't, classic, don't leave fish to find fish. But if you're marking fish and you're marking bait, you're doing the right stuff. It's just a matter of finding the window of when they want to bite, and putting time in. So.
Yeah, like Phil said. So trust your electronics. There's one fish, if that was going. It was in June. We found a giant ball of bait out in the middle of the bay. 35 feet of water, just nothing around it, 5 miles from structure. We trolled it, 45 minutes, we popped a 53 running bucktails, 5 feet under the surface. The bait was all raised really high in the column. I think it was all alewife pushing it from Lake Michigan. And we just trolled it. They were there. Trust your electronics.
Actually, I'd like to explore a little bit kind of in spots that you wouldn't associate with that time of year. Because after we had some biologists come in here with their telemetry studies and tracking fish and where they go, there's some fish that do not leave. They actually live in a pretty small area. So I took that and ran with it. Thought I'd try some spots that you wouldn't normally go till fall, and ended up catching a few fish like that. So a lot of times the common spots are pretty packed, so just don't be afraid to explore.
Yeah, don't be afraid. If everybody's casting a weed bed and everybody's trolling that inside pass next to the weed bed, troll one pass length out, and fish get pushed around. It's nothing for a muskie to swim 100 yards. They can't tell depth. So if the food is there, I mean, if they're swimming out to get away from people, they could be there too. So I definitely don't. I look at depth, but 8 to 12 probably is my main depth I target. I'm definitely not afraid to catch fish in 20 feet of water if that's where they are. Or 2 feet of water. So
Tom likes 2 better.
Drive around and find the bait. I mean, definitely the bait is the structure out there. So.
Yeah, especially in the fall.
Yeah.
And what are you looking for on your graphs when you talk about finding bait? I know that sometimes we'll be trolling out there and you'll see pocket of bait here, then you go 100 yards, not much, and another pocket of bait. Other times in the fall, you can go on the Fox River when the shad move in, you can go city blocks long, and your graph is just cluttered with bait. What do you guys look for?
Definitely don't want too much like what's in the Fox from now until March. It's full of bait. I mean, there's times you go in the Fox and it's 20 feet of solid bait. It's I think too much, but you want some. I like when it's balled
It's hard
up.
to explain without, yeah, but yeah,
it's nice when it's balled up. When you got them big red blobs on your graph, there's muskies around chasing that bait, hauling that shad up. They're alewives or perch or whatever it may be. But
you know, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, as far as one of those, say, fall spots in summer, I'm still looking for bait. You know, maybe not as much bait as on the big casting spots, the weed flats, all that. But you want something there. I'm not just driving around in the middle of nowhere. So
You are
you have to find something.
it sometimes,
Right.
but-
Yeah, you have to look for it for a little while sometimes, but you got to find something.
Hey, there we go.
Uh,
Yeah, so kind of going along with the same thing. If you're looking at bait, like there's times where I remember back in 2016 when I caught that big one with Tyler, there was like just gobs and gobs of bait, and sometimes it's like your bait, like it looks like if you go to Cabela's and your screen is on demo mode, like it's like that looks fake, like it doesn't look right, but and it can be hard to catch fish that way, but there's fish there, so that's the thing. It's like, all right, well, you know, you kind of have to play that by ear, but ultimately if you're not like, I fished today, and after that big north blow and after the huge, 12-degree water temp drop in the last week, I drove around and I didn't mark very much bait at all. And that was, at 65 degrees a week ago on, like last Monday I fished and we caught 3 muskies and lost one. But the thing was that, like, there was bait everywhere. So, I mean, everywhere you go, every spot, there was bait on the west shore, there was bait in the middle of the bay, there was bait in the lower bay, and there was bait in the river. That can be tough too. If the bait's spread out, that's a tough gig because the fish are spread out. But ultimately then if you have that big temperature drop and until things even out a little bit, I had a tough time. I mean, I didn't get a bite today. We fished for 8 hours. So that's kind of one of those things where you go, all right, well, the bait it's not gone, but it's moved, it's scattered, it's kind of blown out. And until it kind of figures out what's going on, like, I mean, we fish, if you're driving around, you obviously watch your side scan because you want to see muskies. If you're trolling and you're not marking muskies, either your settings are wrong or you're not in the right place. But ultimately, I watch my 2D mostly for bait. I run Lowrance graphs. I think the 2D is great on the Lowrance, so I can see if I'm marking bait. And again, just basically looking for red, yellow, orange, usually balled up. Christmas tree shape might be perch, usually balls or shad. But I just want to see bait. If it's up off the bottom, that's better than if it's on the bottom. But as long as it's there, I know that there's at least food for those fish, because the reason those fish are moving on to those big sand flats in the fall is because the shad are migrating. And if there's not bait there, the fish just are not going to be there, or they're moving somewhere else. They're in the process of moving somewhere else. So.
How far out are you looking on your side scan?
I set mine to 100 feet out.
I got a quick question. Sure. So when you guys are trolling and you are trolling during the casting fight, typically casting, you guys are running what, Poseidons, swimming dogs, bucktails. Do you guys throw in a swimming dog or Poseidon in your mix when you're trolling as well? Is it something you just don't do, or?
I've tried it.
We'll always mix it up.
All season long. Yeah.
You can't just run super shads. Got to keep them honest.
You could.
You could.
An unnamed guide.
It would work.
Some guys do it.
All right, next one we got is, all right, you're hooked up. You got a fish on. What is your process? What's your process as you in the boat, as the non, with the rod not in your hand, and what's the process that you're telling the guy with the reel in his hand to do? So, whether it be rod tip up, speed, are you clearing rods, are you leaving everything? Kind of what's the process? What's the process once that drag goes off and you got the rod in the angler's hand?
All right, so the rod goes off. The person who's ever going to grab the rod, usually I grab it just because I'm familiar with my rod holders. I grab it and keep that, don't give them any slack. Keep that rod, bring that rod back, keep it tight, give it to who's ever going to crank it in. And then once they have that and they're cranking, then I'll slow the boat down. Never slow the boat down before they're cranking on that rod.
How slow are you going?
I usually steer with my bow mount at like 1 or 1.5, so I'll pretty much turn my kicker motor off, steer with my bow mount just to keep my boards out. I guess it depends how big the fish is, which you can tell right away usually. So if it's a smaller fish, I keep going. I slow down a little bit, but once you got that fish on for a while, you can tell if you got to start ripping rods in and get stuff clear. Just if it's a bigger fish, you gotta slow down a little more. Yeah, keep that rod tip up. Never give it slack. That's the biggest thing. Just keep cranking on it.
You see guys that have gone ocean fishing and want to pump that rod?
Oh yeah, pump that.
Yeah, salmon guys like to do that too. I
Yep.
tell them in my
Reel
spiel
up
at the
and
beginning of the
reel
day,
down
it's like rod tip
oh,
up
reel
no matter
down.
what. Do not pump that rod. Yeah.
I mean, it's okay if you know what you're doing, but just don't give it slack, because that's when their head's shaking and they pop out. But sometimes you do have to pump it a little just to get the momentum, swing that fish back, break down it if it's a bigger fish. But that's about it. I definitely clear my down rods. First thing I do once they're cranking on it, get them down rods out if you're running down rods. Because that's the first thing a fish gets tangled in, especially if it dives by the boat. It's going down through them rods. Yep.
I got a similar program. I steer with my bow mount all the time. So when we get a fish on, same thing. I normally grab it, hand it off to the person, then I'll slow I got an I-troll for the kicker. I'll turn that all the way off and just let the trolling motor do work just to keep everything running. Same thing, most of the time I'll clear if there's down rods for sure, and then probably the first one on each side, I'll get rid of them too. But yeah, just gauge it by the size of the fish and see what else you gotta do from there. If you gotta clear more, he's coming up the middle, most of the time you're pretty clear with the first couple gone.
Are you guys all trolling with your bow mount down?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you turn it on once you got fish on, or it's always running?
The trolling motor is always running, and I actually use the heading on it, so it's always kind of staying straight in whatever direction you point it. And I run it at I got a Mini Quota Tarola, I run it at like 4.5 all the time, and then just keep that heading on, and it keeps you going the right direction.
So the only thing, they pretty much hit it on the head, but the only thing is say Tom's reeling this fish in, I'm gonna take the board off. I'm gonna have Tom back up, he's gonna stand me as far forward as he can, in between the console almost, just to get that board off. So you're not giving it slack at that point. If you're standing in the back of the boat trying to take that board off, you're almost gonna have to tip that rod for the guy to actually take the board off. And then same thing when you're netting it, I want that guy walking back. As I'm netting that fish, I want him as far away from me as I can. Just, yeah.
Yep.
Fish is coming to the back of the boat, all of a sudden people start peeking over the side of the boat, looking forward. Yep, and that rod tip's tipping then. You're giving them slack, they pop off. So that's about all I got.
Yeah, Jamie hit on my biggest thing that and so these guys who have fished with me on a guide trip have heard me say it. Kurt and Jamie and Dave Skinner have all heard me say it before, but when a rod goes off, I tell clients if you're standing right there, you can grab it. But I've been called surprisingly athletic more than once when a rod goes off. I'm on it, I hear that noise, like if that was my alarm clock. I would jump out of bed every morning and I'm on it. So like you jump up, you grab it as fast as you can, you get it out. If it's not running, you can reel quick and try. If it's moving towards you, if it grabs and rips line, and you can pick up any slack that's there. Obviously, you get the rod to the guy that's gonna reel in the fish, and then the biggest thing for him is just to keep that rod tip up. Again, don't mess with the drag. Don't try and stop him. As the guide, if I'm driving the boat, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna put my I'm gonna grab my forward controls for my kicker. I'm gonna put it all the way back, not to neutral, but just that it's barely engaged into forward. I again have my my trolling motor down all the time. I'm steering with my trolling motor 100% of the time. I'm not driving with the steering wheel. If I'm turning while I'm trolling, I'm using my trolling motor. So I'm going to hit heading lock. I'm going to hit the mark button on my graph. I'm going to slow that thing down. And then again, if I have a bucktail on my down rod, I'm going to reel those in. I honestly, most of the time, I just reel them up so that it's to the leader. And then depending on how that fish is coming in, if it's a bigger fish, if it's a smaller fish, most of the time they just kind of come right up to the boat. If it's a bigger fish and it's going off side to side, there's times where I'll take my inside board and I'll let it out some. If it's going to run into that inside board, I'll let it out just to get it out of the way. But I don't usually clear rods besides the down rod. And then I just had it last week, like Jamie said, if guys are peeking, that, like he said, we probably lost a 4-footer because the guy, he's reeling, he's really excited, he's doing a great job, but as that fish comes in, So he's walking back, like Jamie said, I want that guy to be back, like basically between the chairs or up almost to the windshield of my boat, and he's keeping the rod up. And as I'm going to net the fish, he goes like this, and that rod dips forward, and that fish, you know, basically I'm standing at the back, and this was, again, probably a 4-foot fish. It's 5 to 10 feet back. It's hanging back. It's pulling. It comes a little forward. It's just out of reach of the net. And as he's reeling, it starts to slide forward. And I'm like, all right, here it comes. It's moving forward. That's what I want. I dip deep. And as he peaks, that fish slid back, and the fish had eaten the bait to the point that the back hook was in its mouth and the front hook was out. So the front hook caught in the net, and I tried to push back, and I'm like, oh, it's sliding back. So I tried to push, and I popped that hook right out, and the fish just right over the lip of my net and just swam away as slow as could be. And it was a heartbreaker for both of us. But you got to keep the rod tip up. You got all the time in the world to look at the fish. But yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, that's a consummate conservationist. It was a perfect catch and release.
You reached that age.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yep. So basically, yeah, rod tip up, keep reeling. That's all I got. Like I said, about one mile an hour to 1.5 at the most. You really want to slow that boat down as much as you can. If it's a bigger fish, I might have. If I can tell the fish is really big, or if it's kicking their butt, I'll start to rip rods in and get them out of the way, just so that there's more room as that fish is going back and forth, whatever. I'll stop the boat and I'll reel in all the lines if I have to, or if I have to slow it down or stop it. If stuff gets tangled, we'll deal with that afterwards. The main thing right now, we're going to deal with this fish, we're going to catch it, and everything else, if I have to cut, braid, or untangle, whatever, we'll deal with that afterwards. But we want to get this fish in the bag.
Yeah, so I mean, communication's key in that job. So as soon as we get in the boat and everything's set up, I always tell everybody who's not familiar with everything, okay, this is how it's going to go. Fish is going to bite. You're going to hear a lot of screaming line. I'll run. I'll grab the rod. Once I'm ready, I'll have you, take the rod over. I'm going to go hit mark on my graph. I'm going to slow the boat down. The main important thing is that you keep that crank turning and turning and turning and turning. Whether you're getting line in or not, or that fish is running, you just keep turning the crank. That's the most important thing. I always have them as well keep the rod up. However, after I take the board off, there are times that we'll have them put the rod down or to the side, depending on if the fish seems like it's a jumper, it's really jumping a lot, or wants to run somewhere where I don't want them to. Communication is key the whole time. I'm telling them, keep reeling, keep reeling, keep reeling. They probably think I'm a broken record just saying it 100 times over and over and over. And I always say too, the fish is not in the bag until I tell you it's in the bag. So do not look, just keep reeling. And almost every time I'm telling people to keep reeling after the fish is actually still in the bag. Just because I want to make sure that those mistakes don't happen, because it's so easy and so quick for it to happen. One thing too, we're talking about pumping the rods. I know, like on myself, I'll do it if I have a huge fish on and I'm having trouble sometimes getting it in. Is I just walk back to forth in the boat. So I'll just slowly back up, and it may be taking out line. I'll slowly back up. As soon as I'm back, I'll walk forward, crank forward, crank forward, crank forward. Might get 3 feet at a time. And just keep doing that if need be, but never actually pumping the rod. Just
walking
simply
forward
walking
much
back
slower
and
than
forth.
what you're gaining.
Right, yeah. Making sure you can always keep up on that reel.
All right, next question. The Rapala Shad Rap has been out for 40, 50 years. It is a wood bait. You guys are familiar with those. Tyrant Tackle, Tilke over here at Smokies, came up with a Tyrant Raz Shad. Now this is a plastic bait with rattles in it. The regular Rapala does not have rattles. When are you guys using both? Is there a time of the year where you use one or the other? Explain when you're using them. Start off with Tyler again.
I probably own 100 Raz Shads, and I got 2 that work, and they both got 50s and 50s and 50s. So it's kind of, I don't know, not this and Tilke because the baits work, but I definitely like the Rapala Super Shad over the Raz Shad, but the Raz Shads do work. You just got to get the right one. It's kind of one of them baits. And I use it when I want to catch a big fish. So I don't have it out every day, but
Nice.
it's just one of them baits. See, it's your money maker. So.
I'm kind of a fan of the Rapala super sheds myself. I only own a few grass sheds. I do run them, I have caught fish on them, but I just feel like the super sheds catch more, in my opinion.
Yeah, Tom hit it on the head. I run them here and there. I still do better on Rapala super sheds, but could be because I'm running a lot more Rapala super sheds. This is my best one that I have, so that's all I got.
And what was that? Was that fire perch?
Perch, I don't know what it is.
Is it perch?
Still in the box.
Perch.
Green Bay secret right there, right down. Yeah, I do like grass shads. I've got one natural perch pattern that I bought from Smokies. It's a custom paint job. It's like yellow. It's got mostly a white belly. And that bait, I can't tell you how many guide trips that bait has saved my butt where I'm not getting a bite. And I have that running and I'll get 1 or 2 bites on that one bait. Out of 12 rods, that bait will get bit multiple times in a day. And it's like nothing else is getting bit. And I talk to other people, nobody's getting bites. Like, there's a time and a place. I think for me, when I'm running bucktails and I'm looking for more active fish, I think that I do mix in more ras shads when the water's warmer, when I'm fishing late summer, when I'm fishing early fall, when I'm fishing like adjacent to weed beds, or when I'm starting to transition to that first week or so of fishing fish that are sliding off the weeds. I do run the ras shads. The 55 that I caught with Carl, that was a late September fish. That was on a ras shad. Like Tyler said, every now and then they just pop up with a giant. But I run them almost every day. The one that I have on the rod there, Tom painted that one for me. But I just, I don't know. I catch fish on them. I do run them throughout the season. I think I run them. I mix in more of them earlier in the year, and as the year goes on, like today, that water looked like pea soup. It was disgusting, that water in the lower bay. I put on more. They make more weight, they make more noise, they got the rattle. I want something they can find. Fish are still going to bite even if the water's nasty, but they got to be able to find that bait. So they can still bite a super shad. For me, if the water looks like it did today, I'm running super bright colors, and I'm mixing in, I had 9 rods today. I think I had 4 ras shads out, which for this time of year is more than I would normally do. Normally this time of year I would put out the one that normally catches fish and maybe one other one, and then in the summer I mix in more ras shads than I do at this time of year.
Yeah, so I'm kind of like these rest of these guys. I have plenty of both Rapala and Tilke's ras shads. And with both baits, you find your couple that you really like that work well for you, and you run the hell out of them. I have only a couple, I would say, ras that I'm like, okay, this one's out. I feel very confident. We'll keep it on longer than replacing some of my other baits. And like with Phil, September, August, definitely when water temps are warmer, I'm running them. October, I'll almost stop running them, same with November, but then come December, when we're 36 to 32 degrees, I will switch to mostly ras shads. Because of that rattle, I feel like it's just a little bit something else that'll trigger those cold fish to want to actually bite it.
Awesome. Alright, so we know the super shad wrap is basically king out there. What is one other bait, and I'll just ask for one out of each of you guys, that you have confidence catching fish on, that you've caught fish on, that you have confidence putting in your spread? Who wants to go first on this one? Tyler again?
I like a Poseidon.
Okay.
What was that?
That into
I can't say the color, but definitely a normal Poseidon, whatever they are, 8 or 11
10
inches.
inches.
10 inches.
Is the standard.
I actually like the Phantom Exorcist, or Hex. Phantom Hex, that's what I had the most luck on besides the super shads.
What size?
I believe it's 7.5, 7 or 7.5.
I would say a wooden Ziggy is my next bait after super shed, so, or bucktail. After bucktail and super shed.
Yeah, the gimme answer here is a spanky double eight for me, but I know that's not what you're looking for. On a day where I absolutely am not getting bit, and today was that day, I will put out 1 or 2 or 3 jointed X-wraps, Rapala X-wraps, and that I debated whether I was going to say that or not because it actually works really good. But yeah, that's my answer. Would be the X-wrap.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who fishes with me know that I have one bait that's my miracle bait. That's if I'm feeling fishy and things are going well, that it's always out. And that's the Fire Tiger jointed depth grader. For me, it doesn't catch a lot of fish, but the ones it does are very large. So, yeah, that's my other one.
Awesome. Me?
I know it's different.
I wasn't prepared.
I know it's different, that's what I asked.
Prepared for the last one.
Oh yeah. Okay, I'll answer that. I would say a Muskie Innovation swim invader. Or shallow invader.
We all know what you meant.
It's got the rubber 2 tails on it. It's got my biggest trolling fish so far, and I don't know, it just seems to produce when Shad Raps don't. So
I run them too, especially earlier.
Yep.
As I get later, I don't run them anymore, but when it's warmer, I run them a lot.
Next question we got is a down rod. Go ahead.
Grubs or no grubs?
Oh yeah. Tails? No tails?
Depends on the season.
Yeah.
Some
Go ahead,
seasons they
give them the
want.
microphone.
Explain the tails. Bill, you got one on that bait?
Sure do.
Just
Wait, do I?
little grubs. Some people like different colors, like walleye grubs. Depends on the season. Some seasons they love them, some seasons they don't. For me, right now, I don't have a single one that has one on for the last 2 years.
You just put a little twister tail on the back treble? Is that
Yeah,
what you do?
so what we're talking about is normally, like for me, I go to Walmart and I buy every pack of 3-inch white Berkeley grubs that they have. It's like a Mr. Twister or whatever, but I just buy the little envelopes of them and I stuff them in every part of my boat that I have. Every bucktail that I have has one. Every super shad up until this season. Every muskie that I've ever caught on the bay up until this season, trolling, had a white tail on it. And then Tim started just lighting the world on fire, and then I'm like, oh crap, I guess I gotta take some of these tails off. So I've been running no tails up until this big cold front. And now that it's been really tough again, I'm like, all right, maybe things are reset. And I mixed in some tails. But up until this year, I ran tails on every single bait that I was trolling. Just a white 3-inch Berkeley power grub, Mr. Twister, whatever. But, I mean, you know exactly what that do.
Always white, never chartreuse orange?
I have run chartreuse or orange, but white is the answer for me. I found one bait, honestly, so I caught a bait while I was trolling one day. It was like the whole line, the board, everything. And it had an orange grub on it. And I figured if the bay gave me a bait, I should try that. So I put it on one of my lines and sent it out, and we caught, was it a 51 or 52 the next day? But that's the only time I've ever run an orange tail. Otherwise, it's been white all the time. So
I always used to run the white twister tail, like everybody said. Last year I didn't run very often until it got colder. I don't know if it does make a difference, but I figured that on the back hook might slow that bait down, the action on that bait down just a little bit when in colder water. Put them on, caught fish just like it was if I didn't have them on. So who knows?
the other thought with that too is that the shad are relatively small, so it might be something that they key in on that little twister tail. Because they don't really eat big baits in my experience out here very, very little if they're going to eat a big bait. So I think sometimes they see that little tail. And even if the water's all gummed up too, that white tail is something they can see and they can key in on that.
I did run the whitetails for maybe a year or two, because Phil made me. But I do not run them anymore.
Yeah, I go back and forth. I used to run a lot of whitetails, but now I don't know. Last year I got 56.5 with one with a whitetail. I only ran a couple that day, and it did one with a whitetail. So
see,
yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. And that was early September, so it wasn't late in the fall. So I don't know. We go back and forth. I think all of us do.
I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
No.
Yeah, right. I agree.
preference.
Just something else to try.
Yeah. Breaks your day up a little
We
bit.
got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Are you running the same size baits throughout the season? Are you downside and you're outside throughout the season? And then, back up to the second part, are you not running any sort of baits at certain times either? Like, are you transitioning away from bucktails or two more bucktails at any certain point in time?
I guess for me, I when I'm fishing, when a lot of guys are casting, when I'm trolling, I'll run more bucktail heavy. When I'm fishing adjacent to weed beds, that early fall season, I'll run more bucktails. Normally, once I hit mid-September, I'll transition away to almost all super shad, raz shads, and then I'll run something different on the down rod, maybe a bigger bait, maybe something else, but not a bucktail usually once I get past mid-September. Last year was kind of an outlier as a year for me, where I just kept catching them on bucktails. I had it up until the end of September and even into October, I was still catching them on a down run on a bucktail. So it's like, well, again, don't argue with the fish if they want to keep eating bucktails. I was running 2, 3, 4 bucktails into October, which for me was very much out of the ordinary. But if they're biting on it, don't change because you think you're doing it wrong. If the fish are telling you it's right, then it's right. So, yeah, for me, in a normal year, I would fish bucktail heavy much more in the late summer and early fall, and then once I hit that mid-September, I start transitioning away from the bucktails and mostly all crankbaits after that.
What about changing from sizes?
Super shads are the same size.
No,
I'm just kidding. Sorry. So, but
I know
truly,
during the opener,
I'm joking, but
in the opener, I know guys are out there popping 50 pluses on 10-inch jakes.
right, true, and that's the thing. And you talk to guys that were here, kind of before our era, like the Radloffs of the world, and other guys that used to fish in the river, and they'd catch them on big grandmas, big jakes, stuff like that.
Believers.
For me, yeah, right, big believers. For me, I've tried running headlocks. I had a Lee Lures pelagic for a while. I've run all sorts of different big baits. The biggest bait I probably caught a muskie on Green Bay was a chatted Weiss bait that was like 8 inches long. I caught him on a depth raider, but anything bigger than that, I've honestly never. I guess a Poseidon's bigger, but that doesn't. Crankbait wise, like I'm running shad style baits, something like this, similar profile. Shallow invaders bigger too. That is something that I do run in the spring. Again, if I have clients that can't cast and they want to troll in the spring, I'll run some shallow invaders. I'll run those in the late summer, but ultimately I'm not running any really big musky baits on the bay. It's a shad based forage, and I think those fish are mostly full most of the time, where they're not going to look for a big giant meal. They're going to look for something that just kind of is right in their face. And yeah, that's kind of what I think. Anybody have any?
As far as big baits, if I'm running 9 to 12 lines, I will throw either a 10-inch jake or a 10-inch headlock out there. And I have not had a lot of luck on the headlock, caught a few on the jake, but a lot of times the board right next to it will get hit. So I almost feel like those big baits kind of call them in.
Yeah, there's definitely something to what Tom said. I like running big baits close to the boat, just because I feel when fish come look at it, that if they don't want it, they'll fall back and eat a super shad 3/4 back or whatever. So I always like running big blades, big baits next to the boat. Just the kind of the way I think, and all year long too. So.
Yep.
Good transition into my next question. Nailed it, Tyler.
Great.
All right, we're going to talk down rod. When are you running a down rod, and what kind of bait are you putting on it? Start with Tim.
I mean, down rod, I already guys kind of told you, one of my favorite baits on the down rod is the jointed depth raider. And contrary to how I run most of my down rods, this one's actually on the bottom, digging dirt. That's what I've had good success with. As long as I'm not fishing solo, most of the time there's a down rod out there. If there's more than 2 people, there's always a down rod out. Fishing solo, I do not run down rods just because I've had a couple of incidents where I can't crank it in and out and it gets stuck and it's a whole mess and I'm not going to deal with that. So most of the time though, down rods are out for me. I don't catch tons of fish on down rods. Normally the fish I do catch are nice, however. You know, I probably got 5, 6 fish this year on down rods. So not tons of fish, but they happen, and for me, down rods are easy to change. They're quick, so I run a multitude of different types of baits. That's the one that's circulating the most. Otherwise, most of the time I'm running them 10 to 15 feet back in the prop. And I guess most people probably understand, but the prop washes, because of it's going through, it's stirring up all the bait. The bait's flipping and flopping all over. I believe that triggers a muskie to want to feed, so then they'll see your larger bait.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on par with what Tim said. Again, up until last year, once I got to like October, once it started to feel cold to me when I was starting to put on long underwear or a heavier coat, it would be like, all right, it's time to get rid of that down rod. But for me, I mean, September was so warm this year, I was catching fish on the down rod right through the end of September. It is like Tim said, if I'm going to run an experimental bait, it's so nice to have your super shads and your ash shads on your boards, so that way you understand that those boards are going to be running in line. If I am going to run a shallow invader or something like that, something that's going to drag a lot more, I'll usually run that on the outside, so that way I don't have one board. Like if you ran it on the inside, you picture your boards going out nicely in a V. If your inside board is dragging way back, now when you try and bring a board around there to check, it's going to be right in the way. But if that dragging bait is furthest out, that's easier to check that way. But ultimately, if I'm going to be running on a down rod, I have all sorts. Every year I go to the muskie shows and I buy trolling baits that aren't super shads and they're not rat shads, and I try and catch fish on them. And sometimes it works, but most of the time it doesn't. This year I caught one on a shallow diesel on the down rod, which made me happy because it was like $40. And then other than that, yeah, a lot of times it's a bucktail. Almost all the time it's a bucktail. I do run Poseidons on a down rod. I've gotten bit that way. I fish with Tim enough that I try running the jointed depth raider, but it never really works for me. Yeah, a lot of times bigger baits too, like these guys said. I do run, if I'm going to run a big bait, it's absolutely going to be on the down rod. My rods and my boards are not set up to run big baits. So if I'm going to run something that really pulls, it's going to be on the down rod, just so that it's not screwing up my program. Yep, that's what I got.
So if I have 3 or 4 people in the boat, there's always at least one down rod in the water. But if I only have 6 rods and it's rough, I'll be running a down rod. If it's calm, I will probably run all boards, further away, get the baits further away from the boat. So other than that, these guys get it on the head again.
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I won't run a down rod unless I got at least 9 rods out there, and then I'll put 1. If I got 12, I may put 2. But for the most part, it's a bucktail or one of the big baits, one of the jigs or headlocks or something like that. I do run those on the first board occasionally, but most of the time it's a down rod.
See, I'm a little different. I like down rods. If I could run 2 rods, it's going to be 2 down rods. I don't need boards. I'm just that type of fisherman. I don't know. I definitely like down rods. You can even run super shads on down rods. So just a little different, I guess.
All right, we talked a lot about summer fishing, fall fishing. What about late fall? I know there's guys that fish in the river, in the Fox River, in the late fall, November, right before the ice comes up in December. What are you doing different in there in that late season when it's cold? Are you changing speed? Are you changing baits? I guess what's your tips and tactics there?
Don't look at Phil.
Hey, I'll take it next. I got good tips for that.
Okay, so like end of November, beginning of December, we'll go up the river to troll. With the current in the river, when you're going with the current, you gotta go a lot faster than if you're going into the current. So with the current, you wanna be doing about 3.5-ish. Going into the current, you wanna be doing 2.8 to 3, somewhere in there. And a bait that I found that works in the river a lot better than any other time of the year is a 7.5 grandma. That's pretty much the only other bait I will run in there besides the super shed.
My tactics for late fall is to put the boat on the trailer and go sit in a deer stand. I run guide trips up until the 3rd week in October, and if I'm going to go at all, I'll jump in with one of these guys. And it gets so busy on the river. It's a small spot. It's a lot of guys, and I pounded hard September and October and even August, but.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it got a big buck down already. Fish all I want, but that doesn't ever happen, it seems. I enjoy the late fall trolling just because the people who are out are diehards, because it does kind of suck at times, and when you're getting in ice jams and stuff like that. I run really slow. Normally I'm targeting, we're talking December, November, I'm targeting the river, the mouth, areas where there's going to be a lot of bait and flow to keep the water moving and not freezing. I'm going pretty slow. I go about 2 miles an hour. Maybe I'll hit 2.5 going, against the current, or with the current, sorry. Otherwise I'm going like 2 miles an hour. I'm going pretty slow. Being very methodical about my passes, however, and hitting exactly how I want to hit it. I feel like there's a couple areas, particularly in the river, where those fish stage more than others, so making sure that you're doing your due diligence there. And leaves are a big thing in that time of year as well, so make sure that you're checking your baits off. And a lot of times I go no weight in that later time of the year as well, just because you're not catching feeds, so you don't really need it. That's one less thing to stop your bait from being as natural as possible.
I'm in the trees most of the time too, so I don't really have much input on that.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the boat's kind of parked until I kill a buck now, so. But yeah, me and Jamie got out last December, 2 Decembers ago. We had a couple, 2, 3, 4 fish days in the box. First weekend in December, and a couple nice ones. Nobody's out there. There's maybe one other guy, 2 other guys. So it's fun. It's definitely slower, like he said, 3 going into the current, 3.5 coming down. Maybe even a little bit slower, but gotta kind of see how the current is that day too. So you can feel it in your boat if the current's pushing you. You gotta speed up and then slow down when you go to do it. Yeah, you watch your rods and look at your bait in the water.
What do you prefer? I know like during the spring, during the opener, we like current in there, no gates are open and it's dead, it's kind of slow. What do you guys see in the fall, late fall? You like a lot of current or gates open?
Yeah, definitely current.
Not a lot though, because then the water's dropping in.
Yeah,
So.
I haven't done it enough, I guess, to get a good answer on that.
Current to keep the bait fish in. If there's no current, the bait fish are going to slide out in the bay, making it harder to target. So if you got more current, then there's typically more bait fish in there. And that's a big fish season, where the whitefish, if they're starting to push in, that could be the one that you're chasing. So
You talk about that transition. We've got shad moving in September to spawn in October, and then you got the whitefish moving in October to spawn in November and December. How do you switch stuff up or don't you?
Yeah, so the shad are starting to move in now. They'll spawn depending on water temps around 58 degrees. So, they're going in right now. And then they'll start to pull out. I mean, it's not like they all spawn at one time, so it's in and out. Then in November, the whitefish will start to move in. And it's typically like the middle 2 weeks of November when the whitefish are spawning. So right around like the opener season. I would say typically then I try to change more weights for base to be like whiter or blue and try to white fish. Yeah.
All right, we've been talking a lot of tactics, a lot of tips. Let's talk some colors. Basically, your top two colors of Super Shad Raps, let's say this year, and also on the flip side of that, were those your top two colors the past couple years? I'll even start this one off to get it rolling. I have a Perch Super Shad Rap that just, I mean, it's going to have to get retired one of these days because it's got so many holes in it. And I have a pink Raz Shad that just seems to catch fish. These guys, every time I bring it out, they're like, oh, put that thing away. But like, it just catches fish. I don't know why, but it does.
For me, I mean, Fire Tiger's been the hottest one for me this year. Normally, actually, Fire Tiger's not the hottest for me personally, but this year it is. And then for me, my second is Perch, but not the standard Perch. It's custom colored perches have been doing well for me. I've only caught one perch or one fish on natural perch, which is really rare because normally that's the best bait out there. So
Your customs are Rippin' Lips?
all different customs.
Okay.
The reason that I rolled my eyes about Carl's pink one is because I was coming from work one day to jump in the boat, and he told me to go to Smokey's and buy every pink grass shad that they had because they had caught 2 fish. And I have never got bit on it ever in my life. So that's why you eat it?
No, I caught pike the other day.
Oh, pike. Okay. So okay. For me, this year, especially when the water was so warm, September, I caught a ton of fish on flashy green stuff. I've got one custom. I don't even know. I got it from Doug at the swap meet here at the club. It's antifreeze bait. It's all wrapped in foil green antifreeze with like orange and red stripes on it. It just keeps getting bit. And then there's one from Rippin' Lips called the Knuckle Buster. That's green and it's got silverish stripes on it and an orange head. And at one point on Monday last week, I was getting bit on it so often. I think out of 9 rods, I had 5 knuckle busters on it. Because it is, if you watch the video when I had Jason and Fisher Smith on, I show it in that video. That's the one that he had a giant fish on that he lost. So that's, I mean, it's out there. It's a great color. Yeah, that's all I got.
So earlier this year, my best bait was original Perch Super Shad. I don't know. It was really good earlier. I caught fish all year on it, but it kind of slowed down later in the year. The bait that shined later in the season was a custom lemon head that I actually took a Sharpie to and drew a bunch of tiger stripes on the back of it. So my best baits last year are not the same as this year, but my best baits last year are up there yet. They're still catching fish, but these too fast.
What are those you
They're both customs.
We brought it up. Let's hear it.
I'll say it.
I only asked for 2. You guys can give away a bunch of He brought it up.
One is they're both customs. One looks like a Perch, the other looks like a Fire Tiger, so.
Mine is also a lemon head, but I don't have Sharpie stripes on mine. And obviously,
no arts and
any variation of Perch or Fire Tiger is good. My other hot bait this year it's actually a chrome Perch. That's been working pretty good for me.
Yeah, definitely Perch, orange belly Perch. You can't beat that one. And obviously all my customs are pretty much based around orange belly Perch. Fire, maybe a little Fire Tiger, but pretty much all based around Perch. I have done good on lemon head, so there is times lemon head is good.
So you're not really matching the shad. You're not looking for silver or chrome.
Like shad style Perch color.
Yeah, but you're looking to stand out. Basically, is that the thought process?
Yes, but actually last year and this year I've had more action than I've ever had on just the kind of chrome natural looking baits. Like the goldfish, the actual gold one, and the silver one. They've all been working all right.
honestly, it's all what you run, because I don't run goldfish or the shad, so if I did run 6 of them, I would probably get bitten, so it just kind of perch is what we run, and that's, you know.
Confidence.
Confidence bait, I mean, that's all it is.
When you talk about tuning a bait,
Hold on, Tim's got something.
Yeah, I mean, all these guys are right, but it's like what Tyler said, we have confidence. I mean, I run Lemonhead all season long, and I have not had one rip on Lemonhead. And I mean, I've been out there all the time, so I guess I don't know what that means, but take that.
I must not have painted
It's not a Sharpie.
take that out of that box, yeah.
Well, first I'm gonna go back and it's all color matters, but also how the bait runs. You can have 12 perch super shads and 8 of them might not catch. For what reason? We can't tell, but there's something different about that, how it runs, the ones that actually get bit. So I find my baits that throughout the year that I like that actually catch fish, and those are the 12 to 16 that I run the rest of the year. Some just don't run. Okay, so tuning a bait. You want to talk about that, right?
Yeah, touch on that.
Do it.
So tuning a bait is very important. I'll tune, or I'll at least check every bait that I put in the water every day, at least once. I usually check it every time I pull it in, check the pull weeds off. I'm tuning a bait, and there's 2 ways that I do it. You can put it in the water next to the boat, pull it forward faster, and make sure it runs straight. You can get it close with that. The other thing I like to do is go on the opposite side of your kicker, go behind the boat, let 20 feet of line out, close your bail, hold your rod tip up, keep that bait 6 inches below surface, and crank it as fast as you can. You'll see either that bait's gonna dig and come straight at you, or it's gonna dive off one side. So if it dives off, it's coming in straight at me like this, and it wants to go this way, you're gonna take the hook hanger, and you're gonna bend that to the left, and you're just gonna keep tuning it, moving it back and forth until that bait comes straight in at you.
Line tie hanger.
Line tie, sorry. Yeah.
Very little at a time.
Very little at a time. It doesn't take much.
So you just take like a needle nose then?
Needle nose, actually, split ring pliers works really well because you can grab inside of there, bend it back and forth. And like I said, anytime I catch a fish, I'm checking it. In the morning when I go out, I'll pretty much check every single one I put out. I'll check every time I put them back out, I'm checking it. You never know when something happens. You could have hit bottom, it could have got out of tune, you didn't know. It takes 2 seconds to check it, or it could be running for 2 hours and not be running right. So.
That being said, as your boards are running, like, obviously you want to watch where you're going, but watch your baits and watch your boards. If your boards are running out of line, or if you're running, like a lot of times if you're running different baits or whatever, like super shads generally at least run, but there's baits that you put it out there and you start sending it back, and as soon as that board engages, you'll see that bait blowing out. Like all of a sudden you just, and it'll be behind your board, or it'll be like in your spread, and you gotta either tune that bait or get it out of there, because that's gonna mess up your whole program. But just keep an eye on them. And Jamie nailed it. I'm not gonna say anything about tuning the baits, but just make sure you're paying attention. Not that you have baits doing cartwheels behind your boat at the surface that are not gonna be, running properly.
So as it's coming in towards you, if it's moving one way, turn the eye the opposite way, just a smidgen, until you get it online.
Or take it and throw it on the pile and grab a different one and put it out. That's another strategy as well.
So out of the
Just
package, probably 90% of the super sheds I actually tune out of the package. There's only like 10% that actually run out of the package the way I want them to run. So
The custom ones definitely take more tuning.
that is true.
When you add a heavy clear coat to anything on a custom bait,
Yep.
most of the time those take more tuning.
Depending on where you get your customs, if you take a bait out and you could see the thick clear coat on it, you're gonna have to keep an eye on that bait, because some of them will not run no matter what you do.
Yep.
So those customs typically just paint over the original paint, or they don't sand them down first?
I've never seen anybody that sands them down. I think they paint.
Prime it, paint it.
Really? Okay.
And I actually use pretty heavy clear, but that's been like caught a couple baits the last couple of years.
Okay.
So they definitely run different. You can tell, you hold them side by side, they're fatter.
You can say that's got to affect the action
It does.
versus a standard on the box.
Because that's what they want.
Yeah.
Yep.
The less they do, the better they are.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what makes you go crazy, because some days they bite a bait that shouldn't work, and that bait never works again.
And to Kurt's point here is that, you know, the less it does, the better it is. Sometimes they'll, a lot of like the headlocks, they've got what they call a wander or a walk to them, where they'll track a little bit, then they'll kick out, then they'll kick out. We don't do that too much out here, do we? We don't.
It does work sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes.
Again, I think it's very good attractant to have one out there that walks like crazy.
Yeah.
They're gonna come look at it.
Yeah.
It's like a Ziggy.
From my
a Ziggy, you
experience-
can get
Yep.
to walk back and forth a lot. You can actually take the lip out and actually flip around to make it do that. So you can even see that in your board. If it's calm, all your boards are running in a line. All of a sudden, the board that has your Ziggy on it, it'll drop back 2 feet. Then it'll just slowly catch up.
Really?
5 seconds later, that board's going to drop back again. It should catch up. That's it, walking to the side.
All right, I got one more for you guys, and then we'll open it up to questions. What is your best piece of advice for a new angler? And maybe it could be the same or something also, what not to do. What's your best advice on not to do? Phil, you want to start that one?
Yeah, I guess I've been kind of hitting these points throughout the whole thing, but really for me, the best advice that I can give is to trust your electronics. If you're marking muskies, especially if you're driving and you're marking muskies on your side scan, you're doing something right. Like if you're gonna, and it's not a matter of like, well, these fish aren't biting, I'm gonna leave. It's like if you're marking muskies and you're trolling. I mean, I tell clients when we're setting up an 8-hour guide trip, we're gonna look for 1 or 2 big bites in a day. So literally, like if you're marking fish, don't just leave because those fish aren't biting. You're waiting for the window, you're waiting for those fish to bite. I mean, stay on them, stay in the bait, keep your baits clear. This is like 10 different tips, but the main thing is just don't give them slack, don't horse them. I guess the worst thing you could do if you're fighting, since it's I've been having nightmares about it, is peeking when somebody's trying to net your fish. Like just, like I said, you have all the time in the world to look at that fish. Once it's in the bag, you can take pictures, you can measure it, everything else, but if you try and look when they're trying to net it, even the fish that I caught with Kyle at 55, that I didn't peek, but he went to net it and that fish slid back a little bit, and I just heard, oh no, 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 and I freaked out a little bit, but Kyle netted it and we were good to go. But it's just rod tip up, constant tension, slack is the enemy. That's the best thing I can say.
So one thing not to do is don't leave fish to find fish. And I did that enough this fall and screwed myself. Whatever. But I think one of the best things you can do is actually come to these meetings, participate in these meetings, meet new people, people that'll take you out, people you can learn from. That's how I got where I was. And I met a lot of great people that took me fishing, and I learned really quick off of all these guys. So
You're a captain now as well, right?
yeah.
So actually 4 of you are captains, right?
So hopefully next year I will start running trips. I've had my captain's license for 2 years and kind of been waiting. Finally ready to do it. So
awesome. You come on trips.
Yeah.
Phil did cover a lot of points, but
sorry.
if you are in the right spot, marking bait fish, like he said, I mean, the best thing you can do is just keep trying different things. If you know the fish and the bait are there, just different baits, different speeds, direction, anything you can think of. You slide a little deeper, a little shallower. That's what I got for the best advice. Just never give that up. Keep trying. They'll bite eventually, even if it's not that day. It might take a day, 2 days, a week. You'll get them eventually. It's a bait and you're marking fish.
Yeah, just like Tom said, PMA, positive muskie attitude. Just get out there early and stay as long as you can. I mean, they got to eat eventually. The best guides on the bay go days without a fish some days, and they go out the next morning and catch 3, doing the same thing. You just keep them super shads out and keep on trolling.
Yeah.
That's my motto.
Can we get a sticker made of that?
Yeah. I guess, and I'm not trying to steal it from Tim here, but I guess like to piggyback on Tyler's point, one thing that I'll say too is if you're marking fish and you're marking bait, like, and it's kind of a football analogy, but stay in the pocket. Don't go and like, if you have 6 rods out, don't be like, all right, super shads aren't working. I'm gonna run all this other crazy stuff, like, and then not to say that you can't experiment and figure something out, but we've been trying to reinvent the wheel for the last 10 years, and these fish just keep eating super shads, and it drives us all crazy. But if you do reinvent the wheel, please send me a message, find me on Facebook, call me, text me. But I'm telling you, like, if you're on fish, at least keep a couple super shads out, keep them honest, like, run some normal stuff, and then by all means experiment, but like, don't just go off the reservation and pick some crazy, like, I'm gonna run a 14-inch, you know, whatever, like, just
do one, but not all 6.
That's what I'm saying, right? Just keep, like, we say that all the time, like, keep them honest, like, run some super shads, because that's kind of your barometer of are they biting or are they not. And then, you know, if you're out there for 2 hours and all of a sudden you're like, take these things off, we're running all crazy stuff, like, that's not going to be the answer in my experience for sure. So.
Yeah, we kind of piggyback off what all these guys said is the best advice is time on the water, is actually being out there. The more you're out there, the more you're going to run across things. You'll get through the obstacles. You find out what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I mean, I can say for me, like, you know, that hot streak I was on in September was just being out there all the time. I mean, I was out there 5 days a week or more, and when you're out there that much, you know where the fish are, you know what they want to eat. But then the other point of that is also don't get stuck in your ways. So there's some days I was out there where they didn't want super shads. So you have to, you know, put out different baits. You have to try to do something different. Slide out deep, slide in shallow, go faster, go slower. You know, and don't be afraid to. Every day I'm going fishing, I'm running Perch and Fire Tiger Super Shad. I'm going to run 8 feet of water. I'm going to go 3.25 miles an hour the entire day. I'm not going to turn around. I'm going on a straight line. So I mean, yes, I mean, do what works for you, but don't just do that. I mean, there's days where that's not going to work. You have to switch it up.
That's all I got. We'll open it up for questions. Answer everything?
Please more on the bait. This isn't a question.
Sorry.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, go with the.
I was just more on the bait. Are you looking for more like just a straight up 2D image, looking for balls? You just want to basically see it light up like a freaking Christmas tree, right?
Right, so you bring up Christmas tree. Christmas trees in your grass are normally perch. So if you see that, that's normally perch. Fall bait are normally your shad style fish, or alewives or smaller type of bait fish like that. 2D is most of what you're looking at, but you can see it on side scan as well.
Yeah, I mean, if the worst thing you can have is no bait. You know, if you have a lot of bait, sometimes that makes it tougher. A lot of bait is going to bring fish in, but you got more competition. If you are literally marking no bait, like I was for part of the day today, it's going to be tough. You got to find a fish that's trying to move to find bait at that point. That fish isn't hanging out watching the bait. But yeah, I mean, like you said, just normally you're marking sporadic. Like ideally for me, if it's gobs and gobs of bait, like I talked before, demo mode, that can be tough. I might slide off that a little bit to where I'm just marking, like as I'm driving on my screen as it goes by, you know, ball of bait, you know, smaller thing like this, you know, and just that there's bait on my screen, but it's not covered in bait. That can make it really tough when it's just covered in bait. So. Anybody else have anything to add to that? Okay.
This isn't a question, but you might get a kick out of just these 2 quick points. This will be real quick. As I mentioned, I was the first president of the club, and that was in 1989. That just happened to be the year that the DNR started the remedial action plan and decided they wanted to put muskies in the bay. So they approached the club and asked for funding to go get to Michigan to get eggs. And we were a brand new club, and we didn't really have any other projects, so I agreed to it, and it was a real point of contention. it was all old guys in the club, kind of guys that, you know, there was no graphite reproductions back then. Everybody had a wooden club in their boat. And they just showed it. And some of these were old, cantankerous characters, man. The stonemasons that put up the pyramids. Think of you. So there was a big fight about this for years, and all of our funding went towards this program. And a lot of guys were very pissed. And I had one guy grab me right by the neck, stick his bratwurst-sized finger right in my nose and say, "You will never catch a muskie out in that body of water," and storm out of a meeting. So I think we proved that wrong.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then a couple years later, I went to a meeting down in the Brown County building about legalizing trolling in the state of Wisconsin. And all the guides from Vilas and Oneida County formed a little group and traveled to every county to go to these meetings. And I was the lone voice there standing up for trolling. And in the meantime, no fish were being caught out here yet. They were just looking at it. So I was saying that, well, at someday we're going to have to troll out here, and I mean, like, handicapped people could troll, or maybe ladies. And it got so contentious in this meeting that they surrounded me, and an armed Brown County Sheriff deputy had to walk me into the elevator, down the elevator, and to my car because they were threatening to kill me because I wanted to consider trolling. What they ended up doing in 1992 is legalizing back trolling. Does anybody remember this?
Oh, yeah.
It was a 2-3 year period. So we all had to build these custom things for the back. So we're out here driving around backwards.
Wave whackers, yeah.
Yeah. And they were homemade ones
yeah.
because you couldn't even buy them back then. So I just want to mention that to see how much has changed here. I haven't been to a meeting in a long time. So this was very enlightening for me to see all the technology and all this stuff. But believe me, at one point, nobody wanted to put any effort into any of this.
Let me say thank you for doing that, obviously. And,
Dave, so not having been at a meeting in so long, and from what it came from, what do you think?
Well, it's really great that there's all these people and all this energy, and you guys have got this thing dialed down to systems and everything. So I don't spend much time out here. I fish muskies up north a little bit, and in the river in the spring and fall. But Dave here has been taking me out trolling just the last month and a half or so. And he's got it dialed into this kind of system. I did get a 47-incher out there doing that my first time out, I think.
Nice.
So it's been very enlightening to see how this all works. We have weeds as a nemesis out there because it was September and we're doing that. But I fish all kinds of ways. I like jigging for muskies, so I'll be one of the last guys out here, but I'll be doing this. So interesting that there's this much interest in this, and all the money that's poured into this area because of that program. Does the club sponsor any DNI or stocking anymore out here?
So they basically do most of it on their own. We offer our help.
Okay.
Our obviously we offer money as much as we can.
At one point, every penny from the early chapter went towards that.
Yeah, so there was a program that we're still involved in. Dave touched on it earlier, where they asked for a grant for to open up some tank space in Wild Rose so they could stock more Great Lakes muskies. It was $4,000 a year for 5 years. Sign us up. We're in. We did that. We did a couple other programs where they were able to add some new tanks for walleyes and sturgeon at Wild Rose, which in turn made more room for muskie. We're going to do that. So anytime they come with us with either research projects or stocking or anything like that, we're more than willing to give them whatever they need to make that happen.
And anytime we have those biologists here, we tell them if you need anything, if you want for research or something, let us know. Please make us your first call.
If you want a gas card,
yeah, right. Yeah,
they don't do the traditional.
That's why we exist.
They don't do the traditional take a donation for stocking like these do.
So to answer your question, it was pretty weird pulling in the parking lot tonight. I walked in, I didn't know anyone, but I'm very glad it came.
Yeah, thanks for coming. We appreciate everything you've done for the fishery and everything. I mean, this is all because of you, man. That's awesome.
I never thought it would
get literally, my whole life is totally different because of this club and because of these fish that are out there. I wouldn't even be living here. I wouldn't be doing any of this stuff if it wasn't.
Would you still do it if you had to go backwards?
What I did was
Didn't drive around backwards.
Oh, yeah, that way, yeah. I don't know. It'd be a lot tougher, yeah.
I think the trick to that is you troll at night, you switch your lights around.
Yeah.
Big motor to be on the truck.
Yeah.
I got a question. When I started, the hardest thing for me was lure depth. And I know Tim helped me out a little bit because there is no charts for super shed. There is some, but they don't have weights on them.
Mhm.
So I created my own charts, and Tim helped me a little bit. But maybe you guys could help the group understand how far do you run your lures behind your boards and with your spreads? Dive curve.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables as what you're running, braid versus mono, size weights, size leads, up to the weight, how fast you're going, current, all that kind of does different on the depth there. Mostly, I run it's between 8 and 35 back. So just kind of variable and go from there and then dial it in as needed.
Yeah, I'm in the same wheelhouse. I run normally, and I shade a little bit deeper fishing in depths, but I run 15 to 30 back. If I know I'm going to be running real shallow, like today I was fishing more by the mouth and some of that between kidney and the mouth, and I didn't run any baits deeper than, or I should say further back than like 20 feet back, because I know I'm going to be hitting bottom in like 4 to 6 feet. Ultimately, I don't worry too much about how deep my lure is running. To be honest with you, I run 15 to 30 feet back, and I know that if that bait is running 3 feet down or 5 feet down, ultimately if a big muskie wants to get it, it's going to flick its tail and it's going to grab it. Like it doesn't, there are times where I think it's better to run your baits deeper, and then I'll shade closer to that 30 feet. But ultimately for me, when I'm running baits, if I'm running 12 rods, I'm going to run something close to 15 on the outside and something close to 30 on the inside. So that way, as I reel them past, again, talking about checking them, because that's what we got to do all day, but we run that outside board in and run it over all those other lines as I bring it in. I want that to be the highest up bait, and I bring that over all them other baits, and as long as that's the highest up, it doesn't normally tangle. I very rarely tangle when I'm running muskie trolling, because it just comes over the top, and I can pull it, I rip it. You know, as I'm reeling, I do everything that they say not to do when you're fighting a fish. I'm ripping it, I'm reeling really fast, I'm pumping the rod, and I'm just trying to get it to the middle, and then I can bring it right up. But if you're running deeper on the outside, or if you're running all the same, there's much more potential for that bait to run into another inside line as you're going over it. So I do vary them a little bit. Honestly, I run the same numbers every day. I've caught a lot of big fish at certain numbers between 15 and 30, so I run them, and I don't think it makes that much of a difference. I think if you run one at 20 and 25 and 30, I don't know that there's going to be that much difference in how deep that bait is in the water columns.
So last year we did a little testing. Tyler's got a live scope on his boat. We actually tested how much deeper baits actually run with weight on it. With a 1 ounce weight, it literally runs like 6 inches deeper than if you didn't have the weight. 2 ounce weight is like a foot deeper. So weights don't do much. And then for depth, like Phil said, sometimes you want your lure tight to the bottom. There's other times where you want it high. I've caught fish with 3 feet of lino behind my board. So I'll run short. I'll run a couple short and just stagger it all the way out from 3 feet to 28 feet. See where they are. You can start catching by 15 feet.
3 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
It works.
Hey, whatever.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly. Let the fish tell you what they want. All of a sudden you're catching them all between 15 and 20. Put them there. So.
That's the beauty. If you can bring more friends, 12 rods is a beautiful thing. You can run them. And if all of a sudden, if I'm getting bit at 20 every time, I'll put more at 20, whatever.
Yep.
But yeah, if I'm getting bit at 25 or 30, well, all right, I'll put some more inside ones further down, whatever. Sometimes. Any other questions?
No bug snacks or
Whoa, all right.
Oh, there we go.
You want to go ahead there?
Yeah, just putting the split wing on the hook eye, change the action on a super shad rat much.
I don't know.
Yeah,
As I noticed
I
some
put
of
one
mine
on
got-
every bait, so.
Same here. I have both.
I
I do not. I have some that have split rings. I have some that don't.
So I don't think it matters much.
If I put it in the water and look at them, I can't tell the difference. But that's not to say like that one that Tom painted for me's got a split ring on it. I've caught on that one. Most of mine don't have split rings. It kind of is what it is. Some guys put them on every bait. It's easier to change them if you put a split ring on it. I'll say that. But otherwise,
For sure.
I don't think. Hey, you guys.
Some snaps you can't fit in the
Right,
factory eye
right.
because they're all built a little bit different, so then you kind of have to split ring them. But
Yep.
I've never really noticed.
Yeah, depth
one
graders,
catching
if
more
you
than
have
the
I
other.
don't think it does. I don't think it hurts if you have a snap.
I just put them on every single one because something like that I like to keep consistent. Some small little details I try doing everything. Like keep it consistent all the time. So does it help? Does it hurt? Probably not.
I haven't seen a huge difference for or against, but my hottest bait of all time does have a giant split ring on it. So, but it's also the only one I've ever ran it with, so maybe I should run it on some more. I guess, I don't know.
Get more keychains.
Is there not a bite on the bay in the fall when most of those fish are coming to the river? Or is it just that nobody's out there fishing?
In the fall, what do you mean?
Late fall.
Oh.
Everybody's going to the river. Is there not?
Oh, on the bay, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's still fish out there. I mean, it's just like the spawn or anything else. I think those fish come in waves. I think ultimately when it does get super cold, most of those fish push in, but I know that there's guys that have come out here. I know another guy that somebody reached out to me. It was like almost a gun season, so middle to end of November. And I said, hey, call this guy up. I'm going deer hunting. And they caught a giant out in the mouth of the river. It wasn't in the river. It was out just barely in the mouth, but it was out there. So I mean, yes, there's still fish. If you find bait, there's going to be fish there. That's going to be my best answer. Depending on current and everything else too. Like, I'm far from an expert on doing the river stuff, especially late, because I don't do it as much. But if that bait does slide out, then obviously I think your best chance is going to be right here. So, is there anything to add to that?
I mean, it's just a game of odds. I mean, same with spring fishing. 50% of your fish spawn in the river, 50% are out on the bay. So, I mean, you're going to be where more of the fish are. So, in the rivers, let's say 50% of your fish are in the river systems. It's not
Much higher
spots.
concentration.
So, there's more fish there, so that's where I'm going to be fishing.
Sure.
I would agree. Jamie said smaller fish typically in the river versus large. I would agree
In the
with
fall.
that.
In the fall.
In the fall.
So where are the big ones? They're probably still out there.
The big ones are on the white fish.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Doug had a question. Go-to boat snack.
Can you repeat the question?
Sponsored by Quick Trip.
Can you repeat the question?
We had a question. It was a go-to boat snack while you're trolling. When I first started guiding, I didn't have Instagram, and I got it so that I could promote my guide business. And I joked that my Instagram hashtag was going to be dry boat eat chips. I have tried to get a little bit more healthy with that, so I usually try and eat. My wife gives me crap that I eat like a toddler on the boat. Usually I try and eat something that I can eat with one hand, so I eat a lot of Uncrustables. They're $1 if you get them at Costco. They're pretty sweet. Or like the little applesauce packets. I eat a lot of apples. So anybody eat sticks are nice. Hot sticks are great. Yeah, that's gotta be number one. If I'm not guiding, a bush latte is not so bad. Especially if someone else trying to walk.
Bananas.
I've heard bananas are bad luck, but my best day I've had this whole year, the lady brought a banana and I didn't jump her. I didn't jump her at all. I didn't say I didn't get all mad at her. And she caught her biggest muskie, and first muskie she got a 46 and a half, and then her husband caught a 45, which was his biggest muskie. So the bananas are said to be bad luck. I'm gonna start taking one. If the luck stays like this, I'm gonna start putting a banana in the boat every day to see if I can reverse it. I don't know. So, anybody else? Any other questions?
We didn't touch on speed at all. What's all your go-to speed?
Okay, I pretty much live at like 3.2 to 3.5. This year I talked to Tim, and Tim was going a little bit faster. I was catching fish going faster too. I bumped it up, but up until this year, again, same as the tails, I was literally 3.2 to 3.5 no matter what until it got really, really cold. I would slow down and I would go like 2.8 to 3 at the very, very end of the season when I was bundled up like I was going ice fishing. I would slow down to that 3 miles an hour, 2.8. But that was really the window for me. It was 3.2 to 3.5. Again, this year I bumped it up a little bit to piggyback on Tim and caught some fish that way, but normally 3.2 to 3.5 is where I live.
Yeah, as long as you're in the threes, you can never go wrong, basically. Late fall when it's 32, 34, like I said before, I'm really slow. Otherwise, in the threes. But I listened this off season to Mike Lazarus' Backlash podcast, and he was talking about trolling on there and speeds. Kind of piqued my interest a little bit, so been ramping up the speed lately, and it seems like it's been doing okay. But as you ramp up that speed, you got less baits that are going to run, and you got to watch yourself a little bit more closely too.
Yeah, with crankbaits, I pretty much targeted so far this year about 3 or 4 miles an hour, 3.4 miles an hour. And with bucktails, I like to go fast with bucktails. If I'm running all bucktails, I'll go 4, 4.2 at sometimes. So, yeah.
Same here. I'm in the 3 to 3.5 range. I do tend to slow down in fall when it gets a little colder. Probably a little more than these guys do. I'll get down to 2.5 once in a while, and I've caught enough fish doing that.
Yeah, about 3.5, 3.4, and 3.6. I always stay with bucktails or super sheds. Even late fall, 3.5, maybe 3.2, but no slower than 3.2. You lose action if you go slow. It's too slow, but sometimes that's what they want. So. But I
Ultimately, experimenting is probably
experiment a little bit when it cools down.
But also, I wouldn't recommend driving 8 miles an hour. Just hoping you get a bite either. That's probably not the end. Yeah.
A lot of the slower guys probably are using bigger baits too, which have more action. Like you said, baits that have more action work better at slow speeds. The ones we're using, they don't do much when you get slow.
True. Anybody else?
Well, let's give these guys a round of applause.